What do people want? What are people like? What are the values and desires that drive all of us? Some of us spend our lives trying to figure out these vital aspects of the human condition. This is what art is supposed to do. And this is also what advertisers try to do. Their job is to sell products and services. But you can't sell something to a consumer without understanding the consumer. In the case of the Adman, this quest for understanding may arise from self-interest, and it may lead to empathy and insight.
Welcome to The Seen and the Unseen, our weekly podcast on economics, politics, and behavioral science. Please welcome your host, Amit Varma.
Welcome to The Seen and the Unseen. My guest today is Ambi Parameswaran, a legend of the advertising world and an author of many books that both describe our society and teach the individuals within the society to lead better lives. Ambi's latest book is called Spring, Bouncing Back from Rejection, and contains lessons on how to react to rejection with many anecdotes thrown in from his own career and the lives of others. His other books are also a delight to read. For God's Sake is about the business of religion in India. Sponge is a book about leadership. And my favorite is Nawabs, Nudes, Noodles, which sheds light on India and Indian society through the prism of Indian advertising. I've had one ad man on my show before. Santosh Desai joined me last year for episode 137 of The Seen and the Unseen to discuss Indian society over the last 30 years. My conversation with Ambi turned out to be quite as wide-ranging. Before we get to it though, let's take a quick commercial break. If you enjoy listening to The Seen and the Unseen, you can play a part in keeping the show alive. The Seen and the Unseen has been a labor of love for me. I've enjoyed putting together many stimulating conversations, expanding my brain and my universe, and hopefully yours as well. But while the work has been its own reward, I don't actually make much money off the show. Although The Seen and the Unseen has great numbers, advertisers haven't really woken up to the insane engagement level of podcasts, and I do many hours of deep research for each episode, besides all the logistics of producing the show myself. Scheduling guests, booking studios, paying technicians, the travel and so on. So well, I'm trying a new way of keeping this thing going, and that involves you. My proposition for you is this. For every episode of The Seen and the Unseen that you enjoy, buy me a cup of coffee or even a lavish lunch, whatever you feel it's worth. You can do this by heading over to seenunseen.in/support and contributing an amount of your choice. This is not a subscription. The Seen and the Unseen will continue to be free on all podcast apps and at seenunseen.in. This is just a gesture of appreciation. Help keep this thing going. seenunseen.in/support. Ambi, welcome to The Seen and the Unseen.
Thank you, Amit. It's such a delight to be on your fantastic show. Thank you very much for having me.
No, it's absolutely my honor, and it's a bit overdue. And as you, as you'd be aware of from my show, when we begin, rather than jump to the book at hand, and I was very excited to read your new book, Spring, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about your, your earlier life. How did you get to what you're doing now? Because the journey is really, fascinating, all the way from room 224 at Godavari Hostel in IIT Madras. To where your next door neighbor had the only genuine Levi jeans in Madras, so you claim, and here we are almost 40 years later. So tell me a bit about your journey and how you went from IIT, IIM to advertising to what you're doing now.
When I was those days 1975, 76, I was in fact thinking of doing a chartered. I mean, my dad had a business which my grandfather had started, so I didn't want to get into that. I thought I'll do chartered accountancy, and I used to be very impressed with an uncle who used to come dressed in white and white and come and meet my grandfather. So I said, I'll become a chartered accountant, very impressive stuff. And, after my 10th standard, I had to do 1 year of PUC, what we call pre-university. It's a 1 year course in Chennai or Madras. And so I was filling up the form. And when I was filling the form, I put what is called third group, which is economic, commerce, and maths, right? So my dad walked up and said, I was filling up the form for the Loyola College, so I was hoping to get good marks and get into Loyola. So and my dad said, do first group. So I said, why first group? He said, you do first group, then you can go to IIT. So I said, Acha. He said, IIT is good, you go there. I said, okay, ठीक है. I'm clueless, man. It's completely clueless, reading my James Hadley Chase and, Arthur Haley and all that crap. So I filled up first group. And in my class of 30 students in my school, I was probably the two or three of us who went to Loyola. The others went to what is known as the Brahmin College, which is the Vivekananda. So I went to Loyola, and in the first day or second day of class, some of the guys I got to know. I met a whole lot of new people there, and they said, "Yeah, what are you planning to do after this?" So I said, "I want to go to IIT." So they said, "Oh, you started preparing." I said, "What do you mean preparing?" I had no idea that there was an entrance exam and one had to prepare for that stuff. And, so, but anyway, to cut a long story short, I managed to get into IIT Madras and had those days IIT was a 5-year course. So we had a terrific, 5 years of immersion in IIT. But around the third year, I realized that this is too heavy for me. Not I was not really cut out for heavy duty. Actually, my mistake was, if I had enjoyed calculus and high-end mathematics, maybe I would have stayed in IIT and the engineering field. But I somehow started developing a bit of an aversion uh, to maths and to calculus. So there was an opportunity to go abroad, which I kind of ducked. And of course, I tried getting a job. And in the spring, I've narrated the story how I blew that interview. And then fortunately, I got into IIM Calcutta and I went there. And it was a whole world. I found subjects which I could enjoy reading. So I actually I was probably in the third quartile of my class. I was not at the top, not at the second, maybe not really at the bottom, but somewhere in the third quartile. And I thought I will do okay in MBA school, but it turned out I actually did very well. So my first year at IIM Cal was pretty good, and I was among the top few people in the class. And and then and I've narrated the story in spring how I went for a summer uh, project interview with Hindustan Lever, and I went through various rounds, and then I was called for the final interview with two people, me and another guy, and we were asked this question. We were given a watch and told try and sell this to me, and I gave a very long-winded logical argument saying this watch, you're a manager, you need the watch to plan for time, blah blah blah. And my friend who got the job said, "Thank you, sir, for giving me the watch. If you want it back, you have to pay me for it." And he got the assignment very rightly. At that time, I said, "Look, what's going on?" I blew the Hindustan Lever interview in IIT. Now I've blown it again. Why am I chasing what everyone is chasing? So I said, for the next 2-3 months, summer assignment, I will look for a Calcutta assignment. I want to go around Calcutta, taste the food, etc. in Calcutta. So I discovered that time it was a small agency called Rediffusion coming for interview. I applied to Rediffusion and I managed to land that. I think I was the only guy who applied for a summer internship, and I got it. And I discovered advertising at that time. So that's how I went from engineering to management to advertising, and I think probably I was the first engineer, IIT engineer MBA to get into advertising at that time, 1979. And again, in my final year, I was getting ready for final placement, and I had applied again for Hindustan Lever, and Rediffusion called me and said, "Look, are you interested?" This offer was technically made in the New Kenilworth Hotel bar, and at the interview, I said, "Is it an interview?" He said, "No, it's not an interview. You want to join? Tell us now." I said, "Yeah, I'm interested." Right? We spent 2 hours chatting about other things. The next day was the Hindustan Lever interview. So I had to appear for the interview because my placement rep said, "Look, you applied, you have to appear." So I said, "No, I don't want to appear. I want to go into advertising." And so he said, "Then you need to show a letter. You need to bring a letter and show it to us that you actually have a job. Otherwise, Hindustan Lever will ask us, why is this guy not coming for an interview?" So fortunately, in spite of poor telephone lines, fax connections, etc., I managed to get the letter, and I entered advertising. So from entering engineering itself was a bit of a diversion. engineering to management, management to advertising. So, and when I got into advertising, Amit, I enjoyed it so much. For 3 years I was there in rediffusion. I really enjoyed it. I used to work every day, morning, evening, night, Saturdays, Sundays. And then I said, look, like this is life, man. I mean, this is fantastic. But I said, am I missing something? Am I, should I be doing something else? And that's when I said, look, maybe I should get into marketing. And fortunately for me, I got an offer to enter marketing, and I spent 5 + 2, 7 years in marketing and sales, and then I came back into advertising. So this is the long kind of meander. And then I spent probably 26 years in Ulka, and Ulka became FCB Ulka. And before I joined Ulka, in fact, I met Alec Padamsi, the one and only Alec Padamsi, and he spoke for about 2 hours, gave me a bit of a headache. Uh, but he said I was making a colossal mistake joining Ulka, because he said Ulka is going to shut down. My boy, Ulka is shutting down. So I said, sir, I've got an offer, and I want to go to Chennai. I want to work in Chennai. So he said, my boy, you're making a mistake of your life. I said, so be it. So and interestingly, since we are chatting here, when Ulka's founder passed away, Bal Mundkur, Alec was there at the condolence meeting to give a little talk, and he spoke very warmly about Bal Mundkur and how Bal Mundkur set up Ulka, which became an institution, is now LCB Ulka, and FCB Ulka is so successful, etc., etc. And at the end of that, I went up to him and said, Alec, I don't think you'll remember, but in 1989, you told me Ulka will shut down, and you told me not to join Ulka. So he looks at me and says, good, you didn't take my advice. So it's been a good ride, and then I left Ulka in 2016. I'm doing my own coaching, consulting, mentoring, and that kind of stuff. So it's been good.
Absolutely fascinating story. And I actually, I mean, there are different parts of this I want to ask you about and examine, and your journey through advertising has also been marvelous. You sort of wrote a lot about it in Nawabs, Nudes and Noodles as well. But I'll take you back even before that. I get people from various generations on my show, and I've noticed that, we often take it for granted that, our experiences of growing up and the way we grew up is something that is so normalized in our minds that it's not a big deal. But actually, I realized that the way I grew up as a kid in the 1980s, for example, was just a sea change from how kids are growing up today, where they have access to all the music, all the literature, everything they want is just a click away. Communication is easy. A friend of mine said a very interesting thing a few years back. He said that, this generation will never know what it is like to be lost, just in the physical value of having a GPS system. So I'd also like you to talk a little bit about your childhood in the late 60s and then even in the 70s, in the sense, what is your day like? What kind of books did you read growing up? What kind of music did you listen to? What kind of intellectual influences were coming in, and how did those shape you? I mean, one imagines on the one hand that IIT, IIM is still, even in the modern time, a very sort of aspirational path to take for many people, for good reason. But, one can imagine that at that time, the way you described how you almost kind of, wandered into it, not realizing how much you have to prep for an IIT or whatever. So tell me a bit about, the teenage Ambi, as it were.
Well, we used to, I studied in a school called Vidya Mandir, which was in Mylapore, which was like a walking distance from my house. It's a nice 25-minute walk from my house. And it was a very, very kind of a Brahmin school, small size, 30 students per class, and only one section. So everyone knew everyone, right? I mean, my brother was 3 years my junior, and the Krishnamachari Srikant, Chika, we call him, Chika was his batchmate. And, like this, people across all the classes and all that. It's a very cozy kind of a school, right? I mean, teachers were like, my mother will meet the teacher in the temple or in the sari shop, and, each other. And so it's very, we still have a very active WhatsApp group of this gang, and we actually met 3-4 times the last, 2 years. So it was studies were very easy, right? And so I was not a great sportsman. I was not very good at sports, but I used to read a lot. So we used to be members of every possible library in that area. So we are a member of the British Council. We used to go and pick up books from there. We used to go to the USIS library to pick up books from there. There was also a legendary lending library called Eastbury Lending Library. It still exists in Chennai. Yeah? It's a so we used to go and pick up comics and books from there, and so we used to read a lot. And I remember, we used to read from, of course, from Enid Blyton. We graduated to Alistair MacLean. Alistair MacLean was a huge favorite of ours, and we went to the guy who wrote Hotel, and I mean, we used to read a hell of a lot of this kind of books. And we also very fond of Billy Bunter. I don't know why, but Billy Bunter was a big favorite. And there was a government library called the Central Library. And someone discovered that Central Library has a lot of Billy Bunters. So we actually went and became a member of Central Library, paying that 5 rupees or something. And then we used to go by cycle and then pick up. So it was a almost like a dreamlike existence. Every one of us had a cycle. So get onto the cycle and say, you've read this, I've read this. Okay, let's go and explore. And we used to read a lot of these of course, comics were there. As you remember, there was no TV, right? Those days, no TV. We used to listen to, there was a radio Kuwait, which used to come in the night, and we used to listen to rock, pop music and rock music on Radio Kuwait, which used to be Beatles and, stuff like that. And of course, Binaka Geetmala used to be there. We used to listen to Binaka Geetmala. There was no TV. Cinema was a regular. Every week there was some cinema. We used to go to English movies as well as Tamil movies. And I think in the 10th standard, I started watching Hindi movies. And I still remember, but no one seems to remember this, that at once I remember college, school had this project where you sit and work on some projects and all that. There were no classes. I remember a friend of mine and I jumped over the back wall of the school and went and saw Johnny Mera Naam, first day, first show. Something maybe I'm just deluded, but we used to go and watch those kind of things. Sort of, no internet, no mobile, no TV even. Life was so much simpler, for us. Growing up was so much simpler, and cricket was fantastic. You never got tickets. And I remember you get a test match ticket for 5 days. People go for one day. So my first experience of going for a test match was the day Ken Barrington played the whole day and scored 25 runs, right? And Bapu Natkarni bowled 25 maiden overs on a trot. Can you imagine? I was there sitting in the stadium watching that stuff. And it was difficult to get those tickets, right? And you got those tickets, you went there for one day and you share it with your cousin. And then the school punished all of us who went out to watch the match. So we had to write imposition or something like that. So it was a very different life, yeah. I mean, I'm feeling nostalgic, but if you move any of today's children into that life, they will, they're gonna kill you, But we enjoyed it. We had a great time. But the widening of reading actually happened in IIT. School was still pretty narrow. We used to read a bit of non-fiction, but not too much. But it's an IIT that you suddenly opened up. You started reading, Aldous Huxley and Somerset Maugham and Fritz Capra and, Godrej Sherbak and, stuff like that. You suddenly started opening up, which is why I think IIT is a rare institution, because it really opens up your mind to so many things and so many concepts. And we had a fantastic library in IIT. And even in IIT, we used to get onto the bike and go to a British Council to pick up books. And we used to do that. And I know friends of mine who discovered James Joyce, read all his books. We discovered Atlas Shrugged, and what is the other one? Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged was a very, very popular book in the 79-80 period. So it's really IIT which opened up my desire to read more and more of different genres. Not really school. School was more fiction.
Yeah, and in fact, you've also written in one of your books about how your roommate in IIT at the Godavari hostel introduced you to Dark Side of the Moon. So all of you would sort of gather around and listen to that. And Pink Floyd was also, of course, a college staple when I was sort of in college in the 90s, though I wasn't much into them per se. And it strikes me as almost so like if you had to pick one day of Test cricket to watch, it would really have to be Bapu Nadkarni bowling to Ken Barrington, because Nadkarni was the kind of guy who could bowl 40 overs and give 2 runs, and Barrington was the kind of guy who is totally believable that he could bat all day and make 25. So those two are quite a deadly combination. Now, you mentioned that, when you, like, first of all, advertising in those days was not a glamour profession. It was slightly infra dig, and you've spoken about how your friends asked you that, you are a IIT, IIM, why are you going into advertising? And but you said that you enjoyed it enormously. So elaborate a bit on those early years. What about it did you enjoy? What part of the work was fun? Was it sort of the sense of new challenges every day, the creativity that came with it? Was it that sort of sense of having to look closer at your own society? Because advertising, after all, is about selling things to people, and you need to understand the people first. What about advertising did you enjoy so much in those early years?
I think, I was prepared for it. So I knew it was hard work. But, those days, advertising was a much smaller business. So you did not have department like client servicing and account planning and media planning. So Rediffusion had a unique way that because they hired all these so-called high caliber IIM guys, client servicing, account planning, media planning, all three were done by us. So only the media releases were done by the guys, but we used to do also. It was a lot of, what we call job enrichment. It was a very, very rich and potent job. So I at one time remember working on 5 different accounts. One was a cigarette brand called Red and White Cigarette. The other was a industrial product company called Thermax. Third was a sari company called Khatao Saris. Fourth was computers, which was, ICL or ICIM computers. And fifth was Xerox. Now imagine, maybe I'm forgetting Caliber Suitings and maybe one more. So, look at the variety of products. So it was such a rich experience. So every single, and then of course I worked on this fabulous brand called Apella. I've written about it in the book, right? The apple drink from Cadbury. So I had 6 or 7 exciting accounts. Each was different. Each had a different consumer. So one had to understand a boiler buyer, versus a soft drink buyer versus a cigarette buyer. So I used to look at research across these 6, 7 types of consumers, analyze them, then write the brief, sit with the producer, sit with the creative team, get the creative out. I mean, I was a bottom rung, but I was reporting to the branch director. I was a 1-year-old trainee, but I was reporting to the branch director, and he and I used to go for meetings. And I remember he used to let me make presentations. Those days, presentations were done with these handwritten charts, So one had to sit and write those charts and carry them rolled up to, I remember one particular presentation. This was to Kartikeya Sarabhai. He's still a friend. So we were presenting a campaign for a brand of adhesives which they had called Cali Bond. But we as an agency could not figure out what to do. So I went through the presentation and we presented first idea, second idea, third idea, fourth idea, fifth idea, sixth idea, seventh idea, 10th idea. At which stage Kartikeya stopped and said, "Hey guys, are you trying to tell me that we should not advertise this product?" So we said, "Yeah, you got it." So because he said, "Look, otherwise you guys come and recommend one idea. Right? The fact that you're recommending, you're saying 10 ideas, which means you're confused." I said, "Yes, Kartikeya, we're fully confused. We don't know how to market this product." And that time, Fevicol was still quite strong. But we said, "Look, this is going to be very difficult. Just by advertising, nothing's going to happen. Start going and meeting, carpenters and start selling it there." So every single client, every single brand, one was deeply immersed. And whatever reason, though Rediffusion was seen as a very hot creative agency, they also had this reputation of MBAs, very high quality MBAs working with them. They had guys from IIM Ahmedabad, IIM Bangalore. No, not actually IIM Ahmedabad, IIM Cal, FMS Delhi, all these kind of really top class guys working there. So we had a lot of, respect from the client. We used to listen to a lot of things what we say. So it was thoroughly enjoyable. And which is why, for 2.5, 3 years, I was there. I really enjoyed my stint there and in the world of advertising. So actually, when I went from advertising to marketing, I remember Arun Nanda, managing director of Rediffusion, telling me, Ambi, you're going into a multinational company in the marketing role. Please don't get bored too early. So I said, what do you mean? He said, look here, you've been working morning, evening, night. The life of a brand manager actually is a little boring. So just take it easy. Slowly, you'll enjoy that work. And they fully, they never tried to stop me from going. They said, yeah, you've got a good break, go. But, be careful of a few things, don't be impatient and don't be in a hurry to do things. The multinationals work very slowly, work very differently. It'll be good for you to learn how they work. So, I mean, advertising was great fun, yeah. And of course, the other crazy thing in Rediffusion was really crazy. We didn't have a film manager, right? And therefore, we guys used to, the account executives used to do negotiation with film producers, sit with film producers. I remember, oh shit, this is a crazy story, we had done our first television ad for red and white cigarettes. And Ravi Chopra, God, he rest in peace, he was the director of that film. And the red and white hero was a young aspiring actor called Raj Babbar. This was before Insaf Ka Tarazu. He was a really unknown guy then. So those days, films had to be presented in a double header in a cinema, in a mini theater. So it was presented to us, and it somehow didn't have it was a little simple story. A little kid is playing with the ball runs onto the middle of the road, and a truck is coming. It's almost hitting the kid. When our man, hero, red and white man, jumps and saves the kid. And when the lady mother looks for the kid, he is gone. He's, red and white pine walon ki baat hi kuch aur hai. That was a line written by Kamlesh Pandey, the one and only Kamlesh Pandey. So, imagine the film is presented. We're all sitting there, and this really happened. It's a crazy story. So we're all sitting there, and the film was not working. So we were saying, boss, Ravi and Goofy Paintal, who later became very famous as Shakuni Mama, right? So Goofy was, Ravi's assistant. So Goofy and Ravi said, look, boss is not working. And my boss, Vish, said it's not working. Kamlesh Pandey said, not working. So then I said, look, maybe we need to re-edit it. So Ravi Chopra said, Ambi, you want to give it a shot? So I said, yeah. So I went to their BR, editing lab, and I sat with Goofy and I re-edited the film with the editor. And, I'd learned, because, I'd learned some tricks working with other directors like Prahlad. And so I said, look, let's chop it into small shots and create the excitement. And it worked. I re-edited the film with the editor, showed it to Goofy and showed it to Ravi Chopra. They said, yeah, we are okay with this. If you're okay. I said, okay, let me go and take it and sell it to the agency. And we went and sold it to the agency. And he said, yeah, fine, let's take it to the client. So look at the kind of opportunity you have those days, because of lack of specialization. Today, an account executive or an account supervisor may not even know how a film is edited, let alone sit with the editor and actually edit it, So, and I keep telling, my own people, I used to hire people, and I used to tell them, get involved in every stage of the advertising process, So those days we got involved and we really enjoyed it. That was the fun aspect of the job,
And I'm sure it'll sound quaint to a lot of young people listening to this because, what you describe of your presentations is really basically you're making a physical PowerPoint. There's no computer. You're making a physical PowerPoint and taking it equally, when, you speak of editing, you're, actually talking of, taking the reels and splice, getting your editor to splice them and all of that. And you're not just sitting on a MacBook and, moving, frames around. So my question is that do you feel that this sort of process, and it's this dual process, one is that you're doing everything, there's no specialization, so you have to get involved everywhere, and therefore you're enthusiastic about every part of the process and you understand it intimately, and secondly, your inner sense working with your hands. You can't take lazy shortcuts because you've kind of got to do everything. Today if I make a PowerPoint, I can just put whatever I want because I can edit it 5 minutes later. If you're making a physical chart, you have to do that thinking beforehand. So do you feel that there is value in that is lost in modern times? I mean, technology is great, obviously. I'm not being a Luddite and saying that that's an issue. But in modern times, we have specialization, and two, we have these tools, not just technological tools, but also cognitive tools in terms of shortcuts that you take in the ways that you think about these things. And do you feel that those 3 years, it's the sort of hands-on training that you got, actually throwing yourself into everything, was invaluable and played a big part in shaping you?
I think that stayed with me for a long, long time. The fact that you could actually roll up your sleeves, sit with the editor, edit the film, and got you prepared to a lot of things. But I also think that sometimes we look at the past with a lot of rose-tinted glasses. And I think today, what the great thing I did, so-called editing of the film, today a kid can do it with his mobile phone. So sometimes we, the 60 plus lot, think that you have to learn it the hard way. But today's kids can do the same editing. What did I do? I took shots which were 20 frame shots and I cut them into 5 frame shots. I mean, the editor was also surprised. He said, "You want just 5 frames?" I said, "Yeah, I want just 5 frames. Cut 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. In that 30 seconds, I want cut, cut every 5 frames." Uh, Today, a kid does it with his mobile phone. Yeah. So what's the big deal? Today, I mean, very often we think, they are not, but they are so bloody smart and they can do things so well with technology that now they need to figure out what to do with it next. Those days, the reason I did that editing was because the director I was working with was more of feature film director. He liked the long shots, put a trolley and go a slow shot. So he was shooting this was a 30-second film which had so much drama, and in his mind he could not comprehend you could do a 5-second shot, not even 5 second, 5 frame shot, right? So, and when I finally did it, he said, this seems to have the drama which you guys want, because in his case the drama is a 1 second of pulling the punch is the one, is a slow shot. But the fact is, a lot of us of that era of advertising, and I think many of us went on to become CEOs of different agencies. We all grew up like that. I mean, Ashok Kurian set up Ambience, and of course, Prasad, another friend of mine who set up Capital, Rajiv Agarwal set up Enterprise, Nexus Equity did great work for Raymond. And of course, that era people, people like Arvind Sharma went on to head Leo Burnett. So all these guys, we come from that era where we rolled up our sleeves and we did a lot of things. Now it's different, right? Now this era is going to throw up a different set of people who are going to be probably understanding numbers and algorithms and those kind of things. So I think the whole thing is coming around again.
Yeah, and that's a great point you make about accelerated learning, in the sense that, what you had to painstakingly edit out could be done by a kid on his mobile phone. And I mean, I just look at chess, which I follow pretty closely. And one of the interesting sort of insights about chess that is fairly commonplace now is that 80 of the top 100 players of all time are probably young active players today. And one of the reasons is that it's your accelerated learning, because so much of your learning comes from playing, tens of thousands of games of blitz on sites like chess.com and chess24 and so on. And therefore, your pattern recognition becomes quicker, that much faster. You have so many better study tools for theory. You have so much, computer analysis as a pedagogical aid is so important. So you get that kind of accelerated learning, which is pretty incredible. My next question is also about that sort of period. Like in one of your books writing about that period, you've written, quote, "The Indian advertising scene was largely dominated by convent-educated boys in the 60s and 70s. They took over the task from the British admen who exited the country in the 50s. Indian language writers were confined to the language department," stop quote. And as you've pointed out, that was gradually beginning to change. Like Kamlesh Pandey, who went on to write Tezab, is, an example of that sort of change coming. But my question here is that, given that your the people who worked with you, all your colleagues and the people who formed the agencies, would be mostly from the English speaking elites living a certain kind of life in the big cities. And yet the consumers that you're selling to, and this is, I guess, especially true as the 90s happen and liberalization happens, and there is an explosion of the Indian middle class in towns and cities all across India. So in a sense, the advertising community is drawn from the elites, but your market is a much larger market. And that brings about the difficult question of how do you sort of understand what this market is. And this is obviously a time before there is enough data and so on. So what was that process like of getting to terms with who you're selling to and learning to recognize your own biases and kind of keeping them out of the way?
I think if you look at the 50s and 60s, the Britishers, Fielden and all these guys, great guys, they all left, and the people who succeeded them were largely English-speaking, city-living people, right? The Gerson de Cunha. I'm not counting Alec in that because Alec is somewhat different. Gerson de Cunha, Sylvie de Cunha, people like that. But around the mid 70s, people like Alec and all figured out that, clients are getting these IM types as, brand managers. So he said, look, we need to match that with on our side. So he, Lintas, one of the first agencies to go and start hiring from the IIMs. And then JWT followed, Rediffusion, all of them followed. So what happened was in the 60s and say mid 70s, it was largely, I would call the English theater type who were running agencies. You need people who had to do drama, to present, and then the very English theater personalities. Then mid 70s onwards, a new thing happened. The MBA started coming in. And MBAs realized that the consumer is different. Consumer is not you or me. And they started bringing in the discipline of consumer research. And you're working in an agency, but your friend is working in Hindustan Lever, or you're working in Richardson Wicks, or he's working in Nestle, is working in, and that they go on market visit, they go and do deep immersion with consumers. So, in fact, both I think in Rediffusion, one of the most memorable part of my so-called orientation was two weeks or the 3 weeks I spent in Rajasthan, right? I don't know whether I've written it in one of my books. So, they said, look, for 3 weeks, you guys have to go. So I was told, you have to meet Jethanand, who's a sales rep of Siba Gaigi. They are toothpaste, Binaka toothpaste. Siba Gaigi toothpaste, you have to meet him Monday morning, 9:30 at this Amit Varma distributors, Barmer. I was given that on Friday morning. So first thing I said, boss, where is Barmer? So that's your problem. So I discovered Barmer was near Jodhpur. So I had to figure out how to get to Jodhpur, and then from Jodhpur go to Barmer. So which was, fly down, hopping flight up to Jodhpur, and then from Jodhpur take a night train to Barmer and get out at Barmer, and then go to one of those local chawl trees, have a bath, and then go to that distributor with my bag saying, Mr. Jethanand, I've come from Bombay, aapke saath market visit karna hai for. So 3 weeks I was with him, staying in local lodges, going, I covered that whole belt, Ajmer, Savai Madhopur, I may even have the notes somewhere. And every single market I covered some 10 different markets. So that kind of got imprinted into you, that is the real India. What we see in Mumbai or Delhi is not the real India. Though I feel in every big city, there are many, many little Indias, the almost like a village type India in many cities. So I spent 2-3 weeks in shall I say, small town India, and that was very impressionable. I think a lot of agencies did that. They took these MBAs, they sent them into the market, saying, look, you go and spend 1 month working the market. And so from the 70s, let's say mid 70s to around the late 80s, the MBAs formed a defining culture in advertising. They brought professionalism, they brought the orientation towards consumer research. So it moved away from the theatre wala onto a more all India messaging. And that was the time television was coming up. Doordarshan was coming up. Doordarshan's reach was dramatically different from the reach of, let's say, cinema theaters. So we had to do research to understand consumers. So that changed. And then, of course, Kamlesh Pandey was one of the early pioneers who actually, I used to think in Hindi and write in English. So in fact, his Hindi writing is always better than his English writing. But Kamlesh was the early pioneer. And then later, of course, Piyush came and the whole generation of writers came, including people like, Netish Tiwari and all these people came. And the whole thing changed. But it was, I think, the English theatre type to the MBA type. And then now to multiple types of people from all over India. The MBA types are largely, like you said, from big cities, Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, Madras kind of people. But now I think the leadership is scattered. People are coming from advertising leadership is not just confined to the top 4 or 5 or 6 cities today. You get leadership from everywhere. Like, even copywriters, art directors coming from everywhere, right? I mean, Nitish Tiwari is come from Indore, and people are coming from everywhere, which I think is great.
No, in fact, a couple of the sort of case studies that you spoke out, which stood out for me of illustrating sort of the danger of, falling for preconceived notions of what audiences are like was, the story you told about Pradeep Guha at Z, his Chaiwala test, so to say, and also the sort of the Santoor commercials. So tell us a little bit about that, because I found these very revealing about how sometimes you can, have these preconceived notions of what people actually want. And then you realize through doing stuff that, hey, that's it's actually very different.
Yeah, we can make 2 mistakes. And I think the Pradeep Guha Z is one kind of mistake, where the team at Z felt that, our consumer is massy. They had the term massy. Whereas this stuff which you're presenting is very classy. So this kind of stuff my consumer will not understand, will not appreciate. And therefore, let us massify it. Let's dumb it down. So we had really dumbed down the advertising to a very low, mundane level. And when I went to meet Pradeep was then the CEO, and I went to meet Pradeep said, "Yaar, you're doing good work, but तुम्हारा ये यार बहुत मजा नहीं आया, तुम्हारा art direction ठीक नहीं है, something." I said, "यार तू क्या देख के art direction बोल रहा है?" So he said, "No, I just saw, yes, last week that hoarding which I saw looks very, very average, And Pradeep is actually very enterprising. So he said, actually you want some art director on a freelance basis, yeah, I will send you some guy. I was very good." So he let him hire a man. I said, "Yeah, Pradeep, you saw what is being put up on the hoarding, right? Have you seen the options which were presented before what was put up?" So he said, "What do you mean?" So I said, "Yeah, we presented 6 rounds. And then this what went up was the 6th round." So I said, "Do you want to see the stuff?" He said, yeah, show me. And I actually carried the stuff. So I said, "This is first round, this is second round, this is third round, this is fourth round, this is fifth round, this is sixth round which you saw." So he said, "You showed all this?" I said, "Yeah." And they picked the 6th one. I said, "Yeah. What would you guys recommend?" I said, "I recommend the first one. I think first one is fine. Very nice looking graphics. But your team rejected it." So why did they reject it? They said, "No, they said, this is too sophisticated for our target audience. They will not understand it. People in, Jodhpur and Indore and all, they will not understand this." So he said, "Oh, okay." Then he called the head of Marcom and he asked her the same question. So she said the same thing. "Yeah, they presented all this, but we preferred the 6th option because that is nice and massy. Whereas the first 2-3 options are very classy. And I've been trying to tell Ambi, our audience are different. You guys don't seem to understand." So I said, "ठीक है." So by then, the chaiwala walked in and Pradeep said, "You guys keep quiet." He asked, "Raju, इसमें आपको कौन सा अच्छा लग रहा है?" Raju was a chaiwala from a small town, probably living in Bombay for the last 2-3 years. So he picked the first one. He said, "ये अच्छा लगा." So he said, "अच्छा ठीक है, चाय सबको चाय लाओ," करके he sent him out. Then he said, "Yeah, look, yeah, guys, you're still looking at India through your, wrong lenses. India is changing. The small town consumer is becoming more and more sophisticated. Please, for heaven's sake, don't don't massify everything, So, and then later, of course, they decided to do things which are slightly different. But a lot of time we tend to make that mistake that our consumer is. You can make two mistakes. One is to think that our consumer is just like us, which is wrong, right? In India, our consumer is not like us. But the other extreme is a consumer is really one dehati who will not understand anything, has very poor taste. Both are mistakes. Both are mistakes. You need to find the right path in between. Yeah.
And the Santoor commercial you've spoken of was also sort of a great example of that and almost path-breaking work. Tell me a bit about how that panned out as well. And that's also, in fact, mentioned in Spring, your new book, as an example of how to deal with rejection. So it's a lesson in, that aspect as well.
Yeah, so I've narrated that. That story is from Spring, not from Sponge. And when I moved from Chennai, I was in Chennai running the south operations of Ulka, and I had resolved that I will not move to Bombay till I turn it around. So it took me about 3 years to turn it around and start making some profits. And the fifth year was a good year, and that is the year I was told, okay, now you move. Enough is enough. Sitting and having your Madrasi rasam and sambar, you bloody come to Bombay. So I moved back to Bombay. And I was told there is this important account called Santoor, and you're supposed to handle it. And when I started, getting into the account, I realized that the brand had come to the agency in 1989. The agency had done very good work based on this consumer insight that every woman wants to look young, younger looking sin promise. And the agency had done 3 ads which had worked. After that, the ad had stopped working. So actually, I didn't know. Later, I discovered, I was actually inheriting a very hot potato, because the client was actually quite unhappy with what the agency had done. And the agency was convinced that they were on the right track, and they had a new script ready, which they wanted the client to buy. The client refused to buy that ad, put it through research, and said that it's not working. And this debate was going on for about 6 months when I got plonked in the middle of this debate. And those were, Amit, were different days, really. Agencies used to take tough stands, saying, no, we believe in this. And the clients used to encourage that. Nowadays, a brand manager will say, I'm sacking the agency, I'm calling for a pitch. Those days, the client said, no, if you guys believe in that, keep fighting. We'll find a way out. So the agency and the client were engaged in a pretty tough disagreement. And I was put in the middle. And I was told by the client later that, we were told this guy is coming from Chennai, he'll come with a fresh perspective. And he's a bright guy, great experience, and he'll give fresh perspective. So when I got into it, and I discovered the agency had presented a film about a woman in an aerobics class being mistaken for a college student. And the little kid comes and says, mommy. And the agency had called, agencies have this habit of calling these ad films like feature films. So this film was called Jazz. And the client was really upset. What do you mean jazz, yaar? Who understands jazz? My consumer is in small town Andhra, small town Karnataka. What are you talking about jazz? You guys are all Bombay type, Kolaba type. You go to small town India, understand India. You don't understand India, blah, 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 blah. So I had to, kind of unpeel this onion. And I discovered that a client felt that, maybe the younger looking skin is a good idea. Maybe, maybe we should continue, but this is not going to work. This jazz and all won't work. So I said, look, I'm stopping to call it jazz. Yeah, we'll call it aerobics. Aerobics class. Okay, aerobics class happens in all cities, so we'll call it aerobics. So we called it aerobics. So then I said, I will do this reframing. I talked about that, right? So I said, look, that is one. Let me give you another option. So we wrote a script about a girl entering a music store and buying a flute, and someone comes and asks, which college are you in? And then she says, no, I'm not the college. And then the little kid comes and says, mommy. So we presented both the scripts finally. So what we did, instead of saying, buy this, buy this, buy this. So I said, look, we have given you 2. You can buy either of the 2. We are okay. But our strong recommendation is, let's invest the money, make both the ads. Okay. Maybe the flute film you run in Andhra, the aerobics film you can run in DD Metro or whatever, the more slightly more premium channel. So the client, for whatever it is worth, was at his wit's end. Yeah, brand sale was going down for 9 months. He said, "Chalo, theek hai. We'll make both the ads." So they made both the ads, right? And then they took these both ads, and they were very professional, right? It's not as if they're wanting to bury the ad. They said, "No, we will take both the ads, and we will do research in small town India." And when they did the research in small town India, they discovered that the small town woman actually liked the aerobics more than the music store story film. So, and then later we said, look, she's liking the aerobics because that is aspirational for her. She'll never go and do that, dance class or whatever. She'll not do that, but she loves to do that. She'd love to do that. And as a result, that film became a breakthrough film for the brand. And mind you, it took the agency 9 months to convince the client to do that film. And finally, I managed to do it because I reframed the problem. I created a wider canvas, and then therefore the client could step down, the agency could step down, and at that time in '94, the client was even thinking of abandoning this this younger looking skin mistaken identity story. They were said it's not working because what happened to the agency was stuck and they were doing shadi after shadi after shadi and it stopped working. And the aerobics was a breakthrough film. And then from aerobics, we did dress designer, we did a whole lot of other things. And today, the agency has changed, but the client is continuing with the same theme. And Santoor has become the second largest soap brand in India, overtaking Hindustan Lever's Lux, which is my little revenge to Hindustan Lever for not giving me that summer assignment, right?
So they rejected you twice, and you dethroned their big
Yeah.
soap. So yeah, it's almost a soap opera in a manner of.
It's a real soap opera. It's a real soap opera. Yeah.
It's a real soap opera. So I want to, before we touch upon the big themes of your books, and I want to talk about all of them, advertising as a whole, the lessons of Sponge, leadership and knowledge management and all of that. And also, of course, the lessons of Spring, how to bounce back from rejection. But before we want to do that, I also want to continue talking about your personal journey because a couple of things stand out for me. And one is that, and this is something that you've described in great detail in Sponge, for example, your previous book. One is that you're always eager to learn things, even after you've become a senior advertising person and you've become the CEO and all of that. You're not a know-it-all. You're still talking to people, asking questions, trying to learn things. And at the same time, you are also beginning to teach. Like in the 90s, you spoke about how, you started teaching at KJ Somaya and then various other places. And because there were no brand studies, because there were no case studies the way, Harvard and all would, you put together your own and that became the first of your 10 books and so on and so forth down the line. Tell me a bit about this, and would I be correct in surmising that these two, in a sense, are related in the sense that I would imagine that the necessity of teaching something forces you to learn and that these two impulses they almost go together in a sense. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I think it's perfect. I think, Amit, I think it's absolutely perfect. If you want to be a good teacher, you have to be a good learner. Uh, if you want to write an article of 1,000 words, you should at least read 10,000 words of what other people have written on the subject, and you know that you do that so diligently. So, I in fact tried teaching in my early days, as an account executive, working, with my ESD motorcycle. I had a job in Worli, and a friend of mine recommended that Bhavans had this evening program and they wanted someone to teach advertising to them. So I used to drive down from Worli to Andheri to take a class for my evening thing, but I found it too difficult. I had a advertising job was very strenuous and I could not. So it used to be bad. I had a lovely bunch of working professionals who used to come to my class, very nice people. And I think twice I missed the class. And they waited for me and went away. And I felt really bad. And I said, I'll complete the course, but I will not do this again. So I stopped. And then when I came back to Mumbai in '94, a friend of mine told me to go and meet Professor Pyarelal Arya, who was then the director of Somaya. And I've been shaped a lot by what he told me. So I went and I met him, and he said, he always calls sir, sir, sir. So again, he said, I am Ahmedabad graduate. So he said, sir, you have to come and teach. So I said, Dr. Arya, Professor Arya, mere time nahi hai. He said, no, I will figure out. You tell me what time can you give me. So I said, okay, Saturday or Sunday 2 to 5. He said, okay, done. Sunday 2 to 5, you come and teach. So I started. That's how I started. Actually, he said, come and teach a course. Which course? He said, you teach advertising sales management. Okay, advertising and sales promotion. That's how I started. 95, I think I started advertising and sales promotion. And I used to go, I think it was about 10 or 14 Sundays, 2 o'clock, you drive down to Somaya campus, and a lovely bunch of students, and some of them actually ended up joining my agency. In fact, one of my students is a senior, is a president of the Bombay office now. And then I started teaching them, and I used to take articles from, business world used to come out with those articles. I used, those days, I'm talking 95, 96, Harvard cases were very expensive. The copyright was difficult, and somehow Professor Arya said, no photocopying, legitimate denge. So we never photocopied, the Harvard cases. So I used those business world cases. And then I said, why don't I write some cases of my own to use? So I then wrote a few cases based on my own experience with, say, Santoor and Sundrop and Tropicana and, some of those brands. And I even wrote cases on some of my brands I worked on when I was running the South operation. Like there's a case on Fenner fan belt, Bangaram Island Resort, which is a very interesting little case, Cochin Export Processing Zone. So I put all these together and I used them for teaching. And that's how the writing journey started once again. And one of my professor friends in America, I shared these cases with him. He said, yeah, why don't you publish it as a book? I said, what? He said, yeah, I mean, put together 10, 12 cases, put some theory stuff and publish it. So I said, okay. So he said, let me share it with a friend of mine who's a big time professor. So he sent it to that friend. And that friend said, look, these cases look more like promotional puff pieces for the agency. And I don't know who will publish this as a book. So my friend was a little disappointed. He said, yeah, Ambi, I'm sorry. This guy says this will not, is not publishable as a book. I said, that's okay. I mean, that's his point of view sitting in Chicago, but I'm in Mumbai. And so I sent 5 of those cases to Tata McGraw-Hill. And within a week, someone from Tata McGraw-Hill, Deepa, came, met me. She said, we are keen. When can you give me the other cases? So I said, yeah, give me about 3 months. I put it together and I gave it to her. That's how the book came out. It came out in, I think, the year 2000 was when the first book came out. There was just a bunch of cases with some little bit of theory. And I used all of them. I used all of them in teaching. And I know a lot of business schools continue to use them. Though it's out of print now, sometimes I get a call saying, where can I get it? I have a PDF version. I give it to them saying, go ahead and use it. So, that was then, right? I mean, that, you could not get the Harvard cases. You could not get the Ivy cases. It was so impossible to get. So we had to create our own, what you call, Jugaad innovation to do this. There were a few good advertising, brand management case studies. There was an advertising case study. The first book was written by Shubhrato Sengupta. I still have a copy of the book. And in some sense, he is my role model because he was a CEO of a large agency called Clarion Advertising. He took time out to write a book of cases. And he used to go and teach at IIM Ahmedabad, and he used to come and teach us in IIM Calcutta. And a lot of my friends who took marketing specialization in IIM Calcutta do believe that was the best marketing course they attended on campus. So, but between that was 1979, but from 1979 to almost 1995, 96, there were no real Indian case study books which had come out. Labdhi Bhandari wrote a very nice book, which I still have, and very good cases which I used. But there was almost like a vacuum from something like 76, 77 till around 96, 97, And of course, 96, 97 onwards, a lot of people have started writing books on Indian brands and Indian cases, which I think is very good. Today, if you go and search on the Harvard Publishing, there are a lot of Indian cases there. There are cases on Wipro, cases on TCS, Infosys, Mahindra, uh, Royal Enfield. So many good Indian cases are available today. Over the years, Harvard has also reduced the pricing, so it's become much more cheaper to get legitimate case studies to use in class. So the utility of my case books, I wrote two of them, one alone and one with a colleague called Kinjal Med. My utility of those books are probably not as relevant today as they were in the year 2000 to 2010, 11, 12. Yeah.
And would you say that the process of teaching, where you're basically, taking a body of knowledge and you're presenting it in a systematic way to your students, and therefore you're having to not just present a frame for them through which they can look at whatever you're teaching, but you're also, in a sense, building a frame for yourself. Does it then sort of clarify your thinking and make your thinking clearer as well? Like, I would imagine that, sometimes when I'm deep in a subject and there is that moment where suddenly everything makes sense, and there is that, so to say, that thrill of understanding, that you're seeing things clearer because you're being sort of forced to delve into it that much more deeply. Was that there for you as a teacher as well? Like, do you think your teaching side gig made you better at your advertising gig in some way?
Absolutely, Amit. You hit the nail on the head. I think uh, my teaching gig made me a better advertising professional. And I have spoken in the book Spring, I've spoken about how we got the Tata Motors account, right? You know, again, with Dr. Professor Arya, he said, sir, we should do something together. I said, what? Think of some idea of some competition or something we can do together. I'm talking of 95, 96. So he said, why don't we do a case study competition? I said, we can do. So I said, we'll create a special brand, which will be an advertising case study competition. And we called it Comstrat. It still exists. And I said, look, we will do it across all campuses. So what we will try and do is get a client to contribute a case. With this case, we will use as a competition to select, and we'll give the prize. So Professor Arya said, prize hum dekh lenge. I said, nahi sir, we will design the trophy and we will give some money as support. So we'll call it the FCB Ulka KJ Somaya Comstrat case study competition. I'm talking of, this was 95, 96, 97. There were very, very few of these happening then. And luck would have it, when we were chasing a big auto account, and when Tata Telco at that time had unveiled their new car at the auto show in 98 January, I said, look, we will get Tata to participate in this. So we went and met them. At that time, they're not even called for an agency pitch. We met them. We said, we want you to participate. They said, no, we can't reveal any information. We said, don't reveal anything. We will write it from public domain information. You please come for the judging. So they came for the judging. I think there were 5 campuses which were selected. I think NMIMS, KJ Somaya, I think IIT, I think 2 outstation came for the final presentation, and he was there. I think we had the presentation in one of the auditoriums in Marine Line, and it was a great presentation. He loved it, and maybe it gave him a bit of a positive vibe towards the agency. And later, when we pitched for the business, we got the business. But we started leveraging all this, right? Teach, write cases. I remember giving my first case study book to a lot of my clients, and some of them said, look, when you're writing your next case study book, we should be there in the book. I said, yeah, you will be there in the book. And they were there in the book. So, it kind of helped us in many different ways. And of course, the fact that you teach, you'll read more, you pick up more. I used to pick up articles and give it to my colleagues to read. We had a very, very vibrant account planning team. The account planning team was again encouraged to read and write and do research. So it kind of became a nice uh, kind of a upward spinning positive cycle of what the agency can do. and will do. So you became almost like you became more knowledgeable about what is happening. You were reading more, you were understanding more, and that helped us to become a better agency.
Tell me also about, another fascinating part of your personal journey, which is when a few years ago you decided to do a PhD. So what was sort of the impetus behind that? And that also, of course, became a book later on. So, what drove you to do the PhD? Why a PhD?
Yeah, I mean, I was teaching, right? I was teaching at KJ Somaya, and then later I was teaching at NMIMS. So it was Professor Arya who put that idea into my head in the year, I think, 99 or 2000, saying, Sir, आपको तो PhD करना पड़ेगा. So I said, Professor Arya, मैं किधर time नहीं है सब. He said, no, Pune University is offering a flexible PhD. You can go to Pune, I'll arrange for it. You go and attend some classes, which you have to in 1 week, and then you can come back to Bombay and do the PhD. I said, no, uske liye time nahi hai. I don't think I can do it. So I dropped it. A year or two later, Professor Suresh Gai was then the director at Somaya. He called me one day saying, Sir, are you free to come to campus tomorrow? So I said, हाँ, कल आ जाता हूँ. So I went there and we sat down. He said, look, Bombay University is now offering flexible PhD option. You've been registered. I want you to do PhD with us. I said, sir, मेरे पास किधर है time? He said, नहीं, ज़्यादा load नहीं है. You have to come here once every 2 weeks for a half a day class, and I will find you a guide. I know you're academically minded. I know you'll do it seriously. So I want you to do it. So I got literally, kind of arm twisted into doing it. And then when I got into it, I found it very enjoyable. I mean, we had a group of about 15 of us who were in that batch. And one was a very senior executive at Wockhardt Hospital. One was a guy from a nutrition company. The third was Hariharan from Jet Airways. There was Isaac Jacob, who was a professor. So we had a nice group of people. Bagi, who is a professor at IIM Indore, I think. So we used to meet every 2 weeks. And we learned a lot, and we learned the fun of doing research. And of course, dealing with Mumbai universities is a different game. But we learned that also, how to get the various permissions, approvals. So I did my PhD. I published, I got my PhD, and I said, look, I want to publish this PhD thesis as a book, and that didn't turn out that way, but it turned out into a different kind of a book. Yeah, so that's the other story.
Yeah, well, let's take a quick commercial break now, and we'll come back and continue the rest of this conversation.
Cool.
On the Seen and the Unseen, I often speak about positive sum games. Well, if you want to be surrounded by beauty and you love fine art, I have a win-win proposition for you. Head on over to IndianColors.com. Indian Colors licenses images of fine art from some of the best contemporary artists in India and adapts them to objects of everyday use like tote bags, pouches, and home decor items. You get to surround yourself with the finest modern Indian art at affordable prices, and artists get royalties for every product you buy. Win-win game. The Indian Colors new range is in and includes elegant yet comfortable dresses for women and casual shirts for men with standout motifs by artists such as Tanmoy Samanta, Manisha Gera Baswari, Shruti Nelson, Pradeep Mishra, and Jaideep Mehrotra. Stay home, but dress smart. And if you're missing your friends in these lockdown days, worry not. You can show them you're thinking of them by buying gifts for them from Indian Colors. Corporate gifting is also available. So head on over to IndianColors.com, that's colors with an OU, and make art a part of your life. And hey, for a 15% discount, use the code UNSEEN. That's right, UNSEEN for 15% off at IndianColors.com. Welcome back to the Seen and the Unseen. I'm chatting with Ambi Parameswaran about his fascinating career and the fascinating books that he's written, including the latest book, Spring, Bouncing Back from Rejection. Among your books, one that I found particularly fascinating was Nawabs, Nudes, Noodles, because, I spent a few months rather myself in advertising back in 94 before moving on to television and doing a bunch of other things. And I found that really insightful. I'd also done an episode more than a year ago with Santosh Desai, who had some, stunning insights about Indian society. part of which came from his time in Indian advertising, because if you're figuring out the consumer, you are also figuring out the individual, the citizen, all these broad social currents and so on. And a lot of your journey seems similar in terms of sort of understanding what India is all about and so on. So I want to ask you a few broad questions about advertising and, what you've seen over the last 3-4 decades. And my first sort of question is, how much of a reflection of popular culture, or how much of a reflection of our society rather, is advertising, and how much can it actually play a part in shaping it? For example, you've quoted in one of your talks Marshall McLuhan, where he says, quote, "Historians and archaeologists will one day discover that the ads of our time are the richest and most faithful reflections that any society ever made of its entire range of activities," stop quote. And you've also quoted Kurt Vonnegut as saying, "What passes as culture in my head is really a bunch of commercials," stop quote. And, for me, when I sort of look back at, all of the advertising that I've been sort of exposed to over the years, and while reading your books, you mention so many commercials, and I am the kind of person that if you mention a commercial, I will immediately go to YouTube and look for it and watch it. So it was almost like, reading your books took me on this this trip through my memories, through this changing India, where, we take the present time and what it is for granted, and all change is immediately normalized. But, looking at commercials of the 80s and the 90s and all of that was quite a fascinating trip in that sense. So, what's your sense of how advertising has kind of coped with the great social change in India in the last 30 plus years, for example?
And let me pull back a bit. Like we were talking about my PhD and how, as a part of my PhD, I started understanding religion and how religion is involved in shaping our behavior. And I ended up writing a book called For God's Sake, which got published by Penguin. And the guy who was my publisher at Penguin, Anish Chandy, went out on his own, and he said, "I want to be a literary agent." So I said, "Yeah," but I said, "I don't have nothing else to write." He said, "No, no, no. I'm coming to Bombay. Let's have a coffee and let's chat about it." So we were sitting in my office, and he said, "Ambi, you should write the most definitive book on Indian advertising." I said, "What do you mean?" "Yeah, something like, 1 or 2 books he gave." I said, "Look, I don't have that kind of time, and I don't know enough to write that." He said, "Okay, what can you write?" I said, "Look, I can write about how advertising has changed over the last so many years and how it has reflected societal change." So he said, "Okay, start writing 50s, 60s." I said, "No." I said, "I don't think that will work, but let me think about, how to write it." So then we disagreed. I said, "Look, I want to look at advertising as showing children, showing women, showing men, showing food. I want to show it like that." He said, "No, I don't think it'll work. You should look at it more like a historical piece." So I said, "No, no, no, yaar, I'm not a historian, wo nahi hoga." So then when I started writing, I wrote 3 chapters, and then he then warmed up, and then we found a publisher, Penguin, who added a great amount of value. So that's when I started my career in advertising in 1979. Okay, maybe I was following advertising from 1977 onwards. So I had to go back and look at the advertising of 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and then of course 2000 when I was writing the book. And I started putting them in silos. Ad which show men, ad which show children, ad which are about marriage, ad which are about food, transportation. And then I realized that while people have written books about how television programming has reflected changing society, Rachel Dyer has written some fascinating books on how Hindi movies have reflected the changing society, the entire Andy Angry Young Man, the NRI phase. I realized no one has looked at advertising and how advertising has reflected the change in Indian society. So that became the anchor. And I said, I will look at it, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, how marriage is being shown, how sports is being shown, how men are being shown, etc., etc. So that's how I started putting things together. And I said, look, see, the good thing about writing this book at that time was that I was almost out of advertising. right? I was in my last phase of Ulka, and I knew I was, going to get out in 2016, and the book was going to be published in 2016. So I could write very openly about all other ads, So till then, I was a little bit more constrained. I cannot praise other agencies' ad that liberally. I have to be a little constrained. But I said, look, now I'm going to open up, and I'm going to write what I think about great ads, and I said in this book, I will not only write about Ulka and FCB Ulka. I will write about all ads. So maybe there are some 300 ads mentioned in the book. Maybe 10 of them are from Ulka. The rest are entirely outside the domain. And that I think worked. And I think as a mark of respect for the industry, when I asked my leading competitors for an endorsement, right? Piyush, Balki, Prasun Joshi, everyone, didn't need a second reminder, boom, the endorsement came. And that was good. And maybe that's also because I was moving out, right? So there was no question of my going to use this as a promotion piece for the agency. So, and when I started looking at advertising and I started reading, like I said, when you start writing, you got to read. And you start reading a lot of stuff. Like I went back to Marshall McLuhan. And I spoke to this friend of mine. I think I've quoted him in some places, Arvind Rajagopal, who's a professor of media studies at NYU. He pointed me towards 6-7 books to read. One of them was a book called Gender Advertisements, written by a professor called Erving Goffman at University of California, right? And this book was not available anywhere. And then therefore I had to get my son to buy it on secondhand in Amazon in the US and send it to me. And I went through it because I realized that was a useful book to read and to have. So one had to do a lot of this kind of research. There are, the books on Indian advertising, so-called somewhat historical books, are not very great. I'm sorry. There are a couple of ones which have been written, but nothing is in the league of say Gender Advertisements or one or two other books I read in America. The American books are very negative to advertising. A lot of books which are about American advertising take the Kurt Vonnegut route, which is, American advertising destroyed our culture. So Fables of Abundance, a lot of those books I read a whole series of them. And then I said my voice will be somewhat different, and I had to develop a particular voice which was more happy, a more positive, a more, shall we say, inclusive voice of what advertising is. And I think unlike in America, in India, I don't know, maybe because we are all Nautanki artists, our advertising is a lot more enjoyable. Even my friends, Indians who settled abroad, they keep telling me, when we see those ads on Sun TV and all, they are much better than the ads we see on American TV. But I don't know why. Maybe because we are better storytellers or whatever. So I had a great time. So the big question, Amit, is does advertising reflect society? Can it change society? Now, I think the argument is that advertising invariably reflects society. So I remember when I was doing this talk at Godrej Culture Lab, Santosh Desai was my fellow panelist, and a dear friend of mine, KBS Anand of Asian Paints, stood up and asked me this question, saying, Ambi, you're saying that these copywriters are great observers of societal change. I don't think so, yaar. I don't think they understand societal change. They are writing stuff which they think is fun. And in fact, Santosh also said, look, Ambi, I think you're giving too much credit to the advertising industry for spotting societal change. I said, no, let me think about it. And then I wrote a piece in Economic Times saying, look, I don't think advertising copywriters are actively looking at social change, but they are part of society and they're observing the change, right? That goes into their system that comes out as ads, right? So willy-nilly, whether you like it or not, if you're a copywriter, you're watching TV serials, you're watching movies, you're watching what is happening around you, that goes into you, that becomes an ad, right? So whether you like it or not, you are in society, you are a part of the change, and therefore you're reflecting that change in society, in your advertising, consciously. And when you pull back and say, okay, you actually see how marriage has been depicted or how old age has been depicted, right? The other question, can advertising change society? I don't know. I don't think advertising has that much power to, for example, reduce color bias or to reduce caste bias or religious bias. We can nudge it a bit, and I call that neo-visualization. Erving Goffman says that whole advertising industry is about hyper-ritualization. So all the rituals are hyper, so men are bigger, women are smaller, etc. And I'm saying advertising can do neo-visualization. You can think of a new role for the kid. You can think of a new role for the husband or the wife, right? But can you change deeply held societal beliefs? I don't think so. I don't think advertising can do that. That is the job of social workers. That is the job of religion. That's the job of larger popular culture. I don't think an advertising campaign can remove color bias or can remove. We can do a little bit. I mean, I think some of the stuff which brands are trying to do is helping it, but I don't think we can do too much. Maybe I'm underestimating it.
So if you'll indulge me, I'll think aloud a bit. Like, one, of course, I agree with you that it's a reflection of society, but it strikes me that it is of necessity and unavoidably a simplistic reflection. Let me explain what I mean by that. I think whenever you're trying to understand something that is very complex, you do it by figuring out certain heuristics and taking simple narratives and making sense of the world through those simple narratives, which cannot possibly reflect the complexity. And it strikes me that, what you refer to as hyper ritualization, for example, is an example of that. For example, you've written, and I'll quote from your quote, racial and religious stereotyping is used in marketing communication to telegraphically code values that would be difficult to input into a small ad format. Stop quote. Now, for example, we might know that Indian women are, there is no such thing as the Indian woman. It's just extremely complicated. But when an advertiser is thinking about how do I appeal to the Indian woman, they have to build up a simple construction, which obviously evolves over time. Like in one of your books, you've spoken about how, during the Santoor commercial, it struck you after the commercial was made that there's no bindi on the forehead of the lady, and you went to your video head and said, can we use rotoscopy or whatever to put a bindi there? And she said, chill, no need to worry. And there was no need to worry because that campaign was such a big success. So it strikes me that, one, there is a certain lag and a certain possible sort of simplisticness with which anybody, not just advertising people, but anybody who's trying to figure out a complex society might look at a society. Now, the issue with advertising is that it creates a feedback loop, that a simplistic vision of society then actually goes into the advertising. And I sort of agree with Vonnegut. I'm not pessimistic or negative about it, but I agree with Vonnegut that commercials are actually a part of our popular culture. Many of the memes and the ways we speak and all of those things. I was actually in the room when I was in HTA at the time when nothing official about it. That slogan was coined. I think Anuja Chauhan was a young copywriter at the job then who came up with it. And so it can create this feedback loop, and therefore this simplistic vision that advertising might have can actually go back into society and exacerbate that. Like, couple of examples of this which come to mind is, one is the great colonial example, that when the British came to India, they needed to figure out this incredibly complex countries, and their early interlocutors were these elite Brahmins, and therefore they formed their whole vision of what Hinduism was and India was from the vision of these early interlocutors, and could actually have played a part in the further entrenchment of the caste system and looking at Hinduism as one monolithic thing rather than, something that is far more diverse, which is, one example that comes to mind of this happening. Is that something that, as a person within advertising and as a very self-aware person who is not just thinking what does a consumer want, but who's also thinking how is society changing, is that something that sort of concerned you and you looked at closely? And also some of the case studies you've spoken about, particularly, for example, I was struck by Maggie as something that in a sense spoke to a need that society did not know existed and filled it so beautifully that it became a part of culture. that, the kid comes home from school, what do you have to eat? And the mother says, bus 2 minute. And, and that might have been an unexpressed need that I need to make something quick to give my kids. And suddenly that becomes something cultural and is a way of sort of advertising shaping a social habit, though not in any deep, meaningful way. So what are your sort of thoughts on this? Is this something you've grappled with?
Well, in a sense, whenever you do any advertising, you do worry a bit, saying, am I, like you said, it's an echo chamber, right? So, am I doing something which may reinforce something wrong in society? And I remember a young account executive who said, I refused to work on a fairness cream, right? And he refused to work on that brand we were handling. So that kind of protest happens, but I don't know whether, suppose I reflect something in advertising, is it going to harden the societal beliefs, right? Or is it going to, and how can I do something different? Like, for example, in that famous Dara film, where that little boy is waiting there, trying to run away from home, and that, old man is coming, and he says, Ramu Kaka, I said, Bablu, idhar bete ho, mummy to jalebi bana rahi hai. Now, when I wrote that in the book, and I said it's an old postman. Now, my editor said, how do you know it's an old postman? So I said, look at the semiotic symbols. He's dressed in khaki uniform. He's cycle. He knows the kid knows him. So we had to telegraphically put all that, so that the consumer can quickly understand that it's a postman. You cannot sit and explain that he's delivering post, and then you don't have the time. In 30 seconds you have to tell that. So you have to so in a sense, you take a lot of these shortcuts. Some of these shortcuts actually reinforce wrong things in society, like the whole, the servant, the Ramu, in this case Ramu Kaka was a postman, but there's a Ramu's is the servant in the house. So the servant is always dressed in a dhoti, whereas the Malkin is dressed in a nice thing. So you do that to, unfortunately, present some things which should not be presented that way. But you don't have the liberty to do that. In fact, the chapter on mystery of the missing sari, I've written about how a lot of brands have moved away from showing women in saris. Though your average consumer is using a sari, you're showing a woman dressed in trouser and shirt, or in churidar and pants or whatever, because that is the aspirational dress of the Indian, urban Indian woman. Everyone wants to be dressed that way, though they are dressed in saris. And so today, the telegraphic thing, if someone is dressed in a sari, she's probably 60 years old, or she's a maidservant, right? So how do I quickly communicate grandmother? Put her in a sari, put the mother in a pant shirt, and the kid can be in a pair of jeans. So I've quickly established 3 generations, right? So we take some of these shortcuts and maybe reinforcing some wrong things. So I think I've written that, and there is this group of people who are trying to get advertising people to become sensitive about gender, and how willy-nilly you may actually press the wrong buttons without realizing. Like, there is this wonderful film written by my good friend Arun Kale about these bunch of 10 boys playing football, right, on a rainy day, and the goalkeeper is actually polio afflicted. He's got a crutch, and the game is going on, and finally the kick happens, and this goalkeeper dives and saves the ball, right? And when this is happening, 6 kids are watching the game. They're all sitting on a parapet wall and watching it. All 6 of them are girls. So without realizing what have I done, I've said boys are energetic, boys play football, girls don't. Girls sit and observe, girls sit and clap. Till I went through that workshop, I didn't realize this. Right? I said, God, you've done something wrong. They could have easily made it 3 boys and 3 girls on the parapet and put 2 girls to play football. No one realized it. And I keep getting asked questions about, why, it's such a wonderful thing that Santoor has always showed a girl child. I said, is it because of gender sensitivity, etc., etc.? I said, I wish it was gender sensitivity. It was not. It was a purely selfish motive that a little girl looks much more sweeter than a little boy. And you're selling a beauty product. When you're selling a beauty product, you want someone who looks beautiful. So, have a pretty woman and a cute looking daughter makes better sense for a beauty product than showing a pretty woman and a nice looking boy, right? Uh, but people gave us credit, say, "Arey, it's such a forward thinking, that the girl child dikha rahe ho." But that was not that way. It was thought of differently, right? Sometimes you make the right decision for the wrong reason, and sometimes you do something without realizing that you're actually doing something wrong.
Yeah, and another sort of interesting example which comes to mind, which you spoke about in Nawabs News Noodles, is again the example of Fair and Lovely, where the father doesn't really have much hope of the girl because she's not a son. What is she going to do? And she's not now using Fair and Lovely to attract somebody. She's using it to help her get a job, and she gets a job. And right at the end, when she takes her father out to a hotel to celebrate, he calls her beta, ki beta ye mangwa do or whatever. And I remember when watching it, nothing struck me. It was just a commercial. When I read your description of it again, I kind of almost recoiled, saying, how could, which also shows in a sense that I have changed in the way, I look at the world change. And I suppose all of us, that's a natural and positive thing. But looking back, it just seems like such an incredibly regressive commercial, and indeed such a some would argue, like, I totally understand why the account executive you mentioned didn't want to work on the product. That's completely sort of natural and understandable today. So the thing is that when a brand is sort of in a complex landscape where for many people they would not recoil, they would feel a surge of emotion, a positive emotion that the father has validated the girl by calling her beta, which was the original intent, obviously. And at the same time, there is a sliver of the consumer which doesn't feel that way. And obviously, I often say India lives in 3 centuries at once, the 19th, the 20th, and the 21st. And the 21st is kind of small and vocal and on social media and virtue signaling a lot. And they're going to jump on you for anything you do. So that sort of tightrope, how do advertisers and a brand manage that? On the one hand, you want to sort of go in the right direction and do the right things and fight those stereotypes. On the other hand, to speak to these larger masses just for, signaling to them who the mother is and who the daughter is, you might argue the stereotyping plays a functional role there. And you also don't want to go too far, to go out of your way to signal something to a particular elite bunch which will piss off the rest of the people. And you also have to keep an eye on the politics of it, as we've seen from what happened in the recent Tanish controversy. So how does one walk this tightrope? What is how does the advertiser deal with it? Because even if your core consumer doesn't care about a particular set of values, you might have an entirely different set of people jumping on you for, who you're not even selling to. So how does one kind of navigate this? And is this something that you faced in your active days in advertising, or is it something that's happening much more now and you can just step back and say, ki, theek hai, not my circus, not my monkey anymore?
I think it's a tough situation, especially in India, because you're living, like you said, in the 18th century, 19th century, and the 20th, and maybe entering the 21st century. It's a tough job. What you think is a perfectly harmless ad, fun ad, turns out to be politically incorrect. I remember we had done this ad for Tata Indica, which said box shaped, bubble shaped, but then gentlemen prefer curves, and a lovely photograph of the car, right? We all thought it was nice, cute, fun. But God forbid, some old gentleman actually wrote a letter to Mr. Tata saying that this is a very sexist ad. How did your company run this ad? So, the question came to the marketing team, which gave it to us, and we said, look, it's over. The ad is not going to appear again. So that was a reply given to that old gentleman saying, we apologize and, we made the mistake and we're not running it again. Then the guy was very happy. So today there's a multiple complexity here. Let's look at the Fair and Lovely and what is called the Glow and Lovely issue. I mean, is the consumer complaining about it? No. Does the consumer want to look fair? Yes. But where is the problem? The problem probably is coming from the global audience, right? The global investors are asking questions about, you're saying I'm a socially aware corporation. How can you sell a product like this? Now they pull off the product. what happens to shareholders, right? It's a very, very profitable brand for them, right? So they're caught in this kind of a never, never land. So not only is India living in 18, 19, 20th, 21st century, there is also maybe an influencer group sitting in London who's living in the 22nd century, right? So balancing all this is very tough. Uh, and I think we did some amount of balancing during our days. Today it's becoming even more tougher, right, because of social media. So I think companies have to be clear that at a point of time I'll ignore social media. I don't care, right? Like what when Fair and Lovely did that Air Hostess ad, they were panned, right? Social media panned them, saying that this is, in fact, some website even rated it as the worst ad of the decade or something like that. But they said, forget it. This is too small. Doesn't matter. We ignore them. Or even that wonderful Airtel ad, right, where the girl is a boss and she goes home and so she's cooking something and then she's asking him, "What do you have for dinner?" I mean, social media freaked out about it, saying, "Why is she going home and cooking for him? Can't you advertising guys think of nothing better than women as cooks?" But I think Airtel said, yeah, that's okay. You can rant and rave about it, but we think we have done it right because we've shown a very modern woman. She's a very educated woman. She's actually her husband's boss and she's going home and she's enjoying the cooking process. She's dressed nicely in a whatever, a t-shirt and whatever, and she's whipping things up and she's having fun cooking. It's not that she's toiling in the kitchen with her prestige pressure cooker and making. She's having fun. So they said we'll ignore, and I think they ignored social media and they went ahead. Now Tanishq was complex. One, it went on YouTube, it didn't go on TV. Maybe if it had gone on TV, positive force would have also worked in favor of Tanishq. They went on YouTube, which meant the ranters saw it first before the lovers, and they started ranting about it. And the company decided to back off, which I think probably they realized that the time and the place was not right for something like that. So uh, for example, they did that wonderful ad with this girl getting married for the second time, doing the Sat Fera. Now, I could say, someone might say, in our Hindu Rashtra, there is nothing like second marriage. Ye Sat Fera kaise kar sakte ho? You can't do it. And someone can start, yesterday someone protested that, you're insulting Manusmriti because, you said Baba Sahib Ambedkar burnt Manusmriti. That's a historical fact. That's a historical fact. Now, so you got to, I don't know, it's very tough to navigate all this. So you got to be careful what to avoid. By and large, advertising avoids religion. Internationally, of course, advertising avoids religion like the plague. I mean, American advertising, there is never any religion in play. You never show multi-religious people in an American ad. And as you know, and I've written about it, in America, they don't even collect data about your religious orientation in the census. That data is not collected because it's seen as privacy, invasion of privacy. Here, not only in India, we collect religion, we also collect as caste and subcaste and maybe even gotra, whatever, we'll collect all that, right? They don't do that. So we need to balance all this so that without, and then finally, Amit, our job is what in advertising? Our job in advertising is to sell the brand, right? So we cannot suddenly put on the mantle of, I'm a social reformer and therefore I'm going to reform society. That's not your job. Your job, you're being paid to advertise. You're being paid to sell the product, sell the promise. As long as you do it well and you don't piss off too many people, I would say keep doing. So it's become more interesting today, like you said. You got to be a little more sensitive. I don't think in today's world I would have done that box-shaped, bubble-shaped, gentlemen prefer curves ad. I learned my lesson. But it's interesting that today there are multiple target audiences you need to be wary about.
Yeah, and I caught you using the phrase like the plague. which is not a phrase one should use in 2020, I guess. I just want to sort of, you were talking about the Airtel ad, which I think is a perfect case study to go deeper into this. And I just want to quickly point out to my listeners what exactly happened in that commercial. That commercial basically shows an office scene, and there's a lady sitting in a cabin, and she's obviously the boss. And this male employee of hers walks in, and she's not happy with something he's done or whatever. She wants him to work further on it, and he's unhappy about it. But she says, no, it's got to be done. And she gives the orders and she goes. And the next shot is she's at home and she's cooked a nice meal, and she does a video call to this same guy who you realize is her husband. And she says, okay, when are you coming home? Your food is ready. So it's like a dual role. And I found it, on the one hand, for the vast majority of your audience, I think the signal here would be pretty progressive, that women can work and aspire to great careers, that women can be the boss of men, and it need not be something that hurts a male ego. But at the same time, for another constituency, it's regressive, because even though you've shown a forward-thinking progressive woman, you are showing her cooking, and therefore you're going back into the old thing. And there's a similar dilemma, for example, that comes up around, say, just thinking back, if you're talking popular culture, about the film Article 15, which came out, and which I think most people would say is a very progressive film in the way that it looks at caste and tackles it head on and all of that. But I witnessed a panel discussion last year at this festival I'd gone to, where the director Anubhav Sinha was being absolutely slammed because of promoting the white savior complex, and why is the main protagonist a Brahmin, and why couldn't they have had a Dalit protagonist? And this is again, the guy is made for what, for 99.9% of the country, is an incredibly progressive film, and you have a small sliver who are probably just signaling to their peers and looking for things to outrage about, just kind of going nuts on that. So I can sort of imagine that that's
Amit,
a kind
in fact, in that Airtel film, they don't reveal that they are husband and wife. And in the mobile phone, when the mobile phone rings, when he picks it up, it says wife, right? That's how you get revealed. But today, someone may say, why should it be wife? Why can't they be partner? Why can't they be spouse? So like you said, there are different people. I remember at that talk which I gave, I showed the ad of Fastrack, where there is this little cupboard which is rocking, and then two girls come out of the cupboard and they kind of adjust their skirt and they walk off, and the line says, come out of the closet or something like that. And then I presented it as an example of, propagating LGBT or whatever, right? I said very progressive ad and from a very conservative group, Tata, Titan, etc. At the end of the talk, an elderly gentleman, my age or even older, walks up to me and said, you said it's very progressive, but what was so progressive? Two girls came out of the cupboard and they walked away. I said, sir, what were the two girls doing inside the cupboard? That is the story. And he said, I didn't realize. Yeah.
That's in fact what the two girls were doing inside the cupboard. You could say is a classic example of the seen and the unseen. I'll move on to my next question now, which is on, I think, a fundamental challenge that advertising has to face. And I'll again quote your words about the media explosion over the last 10 years, where you write, quote, the last 10 years have seen an explosion of consumer choice and media consumption. Print is under attack from digital. Even though Indian language print is still vibrant and blooming, television has been growing rapidly as well. The numbers are astounding. There were a grand total of 55 licensed television sets when Nehru died in 1964, about 100,000 when Indira Gandhi declared emergency in 1975, a little over 2 million when the Asian Games came to Delhi in 1982. 34 million families owned a TV set when Manmohan Singh opened up the economy in 91. And when Narendra Modi was sworn in as Prime Minister in 2014, over 60% of the 250 million homes in India had a television set, stop quote. And now, of course, people don't only sort of consume video through television. The mobile phones are almost ubiquitous now. So I have a couple of questions. One, of course, goes back to that famous, almost cliched quote of John Wanamaker when he said, quote, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is, I don't know which half, stop quote. And it kind of strikes me that what has happened is, one, media has become very diffused and dispersed. Two, whatever metrics one comes up for gauging advertising effectiveness can very easily be gamed. So, for example, I remember a time when digital advertising used to be sold on the basis of we get so many page views, but that's easy to game with crazy pagination. or that the clicks became a measure, but all measures are easy to game. You don't really know how efficient advertising very often is. In fact, you have used the term spray and pray for digital marketing. And what's happened, and I keep pointing out in the context of journalism, which obviously I know a little bit more about than advertising, but in the context of journalism, what has happened is that over the last 10 years, the way people consume and discover information has changed completely. And journalism hasn't figured it out, and it is completely clueless in that regard. And especially the mainstream outlets, but frankly, every single outlet, more or less, hasn't figured out that the way people are consuming information has changed so completely, and they need to do something about that. And that might even be one reason that advertising as a business model seems broken for so many different industries. So, what are sort of your thoughts on this? How challenging are these times for advertising itself? Do we need to call into question how we define advertising and how we, the practice of advertising itself?
So I think that's a tough question to handle, Amit, because it's a huge question, and it depends on the product category we are looking at. I was chatting about this with Professor John Philip Jones, who's written several books on advertising effectiveness, and he's got a new book coming out, and he says that India has for a long time been dominated by packaged goods advertisers. The Unilever, the P&G, the Godrej, the Coke, the Pepsi, etc. He says that this is going to change because those products consumers will not want to consume based on advertising. They will want to consume based on whatever, discovery or pricing, etc. And other products will rise to the top. It could be healthcare, already we're seeing healthcare, edtech, technology, those will rise. But my feeling is, that we keep saying the 30-second spot is dead. The 100 column centimeter ad is dead. I mean, I remember attending an FCB global conference in 1997 when Bruce Mason went on stage. I think it was Phoenix, Arizona, and he announced that the 30-second ad is dead. You guys better learn what is the new advertising going to be. At that time, when he predicted 30-second ad is dead, it was not because of online. It was because of video recorders, right? There was that fancy thing which was a rage in the US, and people said people will not watch the ad. They will record it, and the recorder will DVRs, I think, right? DVRs. They'll record it. It didn't happen, right? 30-second ad continued to 97, 2000, 2017. 30-second ad is still around. So my feeling is there's an old comment, right? Television killed the radio star. It doesn't kill the radio star. It kind of made the radio star do something different. Like, for example, what you're doing, podcast. So I don't think television will go away. I don't think print will go away. But, in print, since you're in print and I am also have some exposure because I sit on the board of the Hindu. So, we always have the dilemma. Is the news consumer who's consuming newspaper different from the news consumer who's consuming online version? Till now it was chalk and cheese. The person reading the newspaper wants more detail, doesn't want, so he would rather have a headline saying Amit Varma interviews serial author Ambi Parameswaran and some interesting insights. Whereas the online version will probably say 10 things to learn from Amit Varma and Ambi, right? Or 10 mistakes Ambi and Amit Varma discovered when they talked. Right? So it's the online is always a little sensational. But I don't know, if more and more paper people are going to go to online, will that online also have to change? Will it start? I don't think Wall Street Journal or New York Times are pandering to that BuzzFeed and the witty feed audience, right? They are still maintaining integrity. So that I think will happen. As far as advertising is concerned, the big problem, Amit, is attribution. Ideally you could say, why do I need anything? I just do search, right? But search is the last mile. So clients are figuring out that, the spray and pray is not working. Unfortunately, in India, what has happened is YouTube has just become another television channel. So you buy, what is the cost per million? So cost per thousand on Hindi GEC is whatever 50, 80 rupees, cost per thousand on YouTube with slightly better targeting is say 100 rupees, 200 rupees, 300 rupees. Same thing with Facebook. Some of the clients I work with saying, 1 lakh, if you spend 1 lakh, you get 1 million views on Facebook. I said, who? Generally anyone, right? So it's not, then there is nothing. Then that defeats the purpose of digital. Digital is supposed to be targeting, right? So I think smarter clients are figuring out, they're saying that I need to keep running experiments. I need to keep collecting data. I need to understand attribution a little better, right? And I think even Facebook and all these guys are trying to educate clients and saying, look, we can do the full, what they call the full stack or the full pipeline managing and full pipeline monitoring, but it's coming. I think in the next 5 years we will see a lot of that happening, and advertising. And another thing which I think at high time it happened is that agencies and clients are now figuring out that it's completely unproductive to have multiple people working on the same brand. So I think I've been speaking to some of the agency people who are saying, look, we handle everything for this client, right? I handle this, for example, Nissan, and I handle all that happens on Nissan. I do the print, I do TV, I do online, I do search, I do everything because I understand the brand, I do everything. So I think the whole, what we call 360 degrees, I think is coming back. And some of the smarter clients are saying, look, let's not have multiple agencies, running amok with our brand. We need to put all that, with someone whom we can trust. If that happens, then it's good for the agencies. They'll be able to command a premium, invest. The problem is, in the good old days, when the client came to an agency, the agency started investing. You started investing in doing your own research, understanding the product category, understanding the consumers. So you actually became a good sounding board for your client. I wish if that happens, that'll be very good for everyone.
No, I actually agree with you about, what you said about that, the online reader isn't necessarily looking for a simplistic kind of experience of BuzzFeed, clickbait, 5 words of wisdom from Ambi Parameswaran today, or, why Amit Varma was strangled by one of his guests on a live Zoom recording. But for me, what I see, and in a sense, my podcast exemplifies that, is that there is also a great hunger for depth and nuance, which you often don't get in many other sources. And all of us in that sense contain multitudes, right? I am the same guy who is hitting clickbait and who is, who's got 60 tabs open on his YouTube, but also the person who'll listen to a 3-hour podcast and who'll read a book and take notes diligently. But I have a sort of a more fundamental thought on this, and I don't even know if this is a question, but I'm just putting this thought out there for my listeners, because from a content creator's point of view, I've been thinking about this a lot recently, which is that, look, where was the scope for advertising to even exist to begin with? And part of it, I think, comes because when a content creator creates something of value, earlier there was no way to monetize that but advertising. Advertising was a big part of the mix. So everyone who's listening to this podcast obviously is valuing it, is paying for it with their time, because time is money. So if you spend, like, say, 1.5 hours listening to my 3-hour conversation at double speed, that 1.5 hours is worth a lot to you, and you're paying for it, and you would actually be willing to pay for it directly, except that earlier there was no mechanism to do so. There was too much friction. You can't pay for each and everything you consume. So one via medium for that is advertising, where advertisers come in and they buy those eyeballs from me, the content creator, or more likely, because I can't scale on my own, I would sell my content to a platform. The platform would collect the eyeballs, and advertising would come in. What is now happening, and it's very exciting and is going to accelerate, is that more and more for creators, at this point in time, possibly only for elite creators, but more and more for creators, it becomes possible to kind of get that value from the reader or the consumer or whatever you're creating directly. You do not need the platform. Like, I might literally, even though I'm on the roster of the Times of India still as a columnist, I think it is plausible that I might never write for a newspaper again, because I don't need to. I am reaching those people directly. They are discovering and navigating content differently. And there are various other ways of monetizing which are working out for me, which have nothing to do at all with advertising. Now, obviously, in the sense that I have other ways of direct monetizing working out for me, that automatically makes me an elite creator, and it's not necessary that that'll percolate through. But I think new platforms will come and new ways of monetizing will come. So my very rambly sort of thought then is that what is the advertiser to do? Because to me, advertising was a mechanism for creators to capture some of the value they make for their content. So do you have any thoughts on this?
I think it's a great narrative. What you said is right. Today there is an audience for a 15-minute podcast, and there is also an audience for a 1-hour podcast. So the audience is multiplying. Now let's pull back. Uh, where did advertising come from? Advertising came to piggyback, like you said, on audiences. Early newspapers, for example, that's where it started. Right? Early newspapers started, and then advertisers became a little greedy, and they said, "Look, we need more audiences." So they went and created the original soap opera on radio. Right? It was advertising created. It was created by Procter and Gamble because they said, let's get more people to come and watch this. Uh, so that equation is continued, and you gave content free to the consumer, but the consumer paid you with their time, and what you got from the consumer was attention, and for that attention you delivered 5 messages, 6 messages to them. But today I think there is a lot of opening up happening thanks to digital technology. Today you can actually collect money from every listener, right? So you can technically say you want to, what Steve Jobs did in a phenomenal way, right? $1.99 for a song, and he could sell songs, right? Till then it was inconceivable, right? Today there are aggregators who are saying, look, you don't want to subscribe to New York Times, you want one article, pay 1 cent. New York Times is happy, they get paid 1 cent for it, whatever, So that's going to happen more and more. That there are going to be aggregators who come, and so I think this earlier pie in India, even the television pie in India, was 90% advertising, 10% subscription, and that is slowly changing, right? It's become 55-45. Unfortunately in India, and you write for Times of India, I write for Business Standard, and I write occasionally for ET. The problem is English media in India, English newspapers are highly subsidized. Right? English newspapers in India today charge a cover price which is even lower than that of a Hindi newspaper, paper to paper. Right? In fact, ideally, English paper should be charging more than Hindi paper, right? Because it's supposed to be elite audience. But for whatever reason, Times of India figured out that I need to drive readership, and they've driven readership, and they've kept the price low. But going forward, I think we will see these multiple buckets getting filled. It could be the bucket of, say, clean advertising, a bucket of what we call subscription fees, maybe, in film. The other debate which I was having with a friend of mine, saying that, look, if 50% of television audience is going to go to OTT, and OTT doesn't have ads, what is going to be the advertising of the future? It will be product placement, right? Where your brand gets placed inside an ad. I mean, the first big such product placement was American Idol and Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola paid $1 million to just have the Coke can in front of the American Idol jury members. And that partnership continued for something like 10 years. $1 million just to have the can there. And now you're having OTT serials coming. And I'm sure, brands will say, and producers will say that. Producers will say, look, and they will tell Amazon or they'll tell Netflix, look, we are going to monetize this series. We're going to have a car sponsor. We're going to have a suiting sponsor. We're going to have this. We're going to make, 1 crore of rupees from them. Is it okay with you guys? Right? So that will start happening. And I remember seeing that serial with Shushmita Sen on Disney, right? About this Rajasthan drug thing. Maybe you didn't see it. And she was driving a Audi all the time, right? A lot of film happens in that Audi. I said, why Audi? Did Audi pay for it? If they did, smart, they paid for it. But if otherwise, I would say, why did Ram Madhwani use Audi, right? He should have, Ram is from advertising, so he would have probably figured out that, that he'll get a car sponsor. So those things are going to happen. So one other hypothesis I have, I don't know that really happens, that 20 years from now, advertising will be so intuitive that you will not even realize it's advertising. That you're watching James Bond and the guy is ordering whatever Sky vodka. You don't even realize. And then after the movie, you go for a drink and you order Sky. You don't even realize that, what, if you go back to Ernest Dixture And this whole thing about hidden persuaders was that, right? That, that you can actually bias consumers. So that, I think, maybe that's too futuristic, but that may happen. That you will have, every content creator will have 4, 5, 6 different buckets from which he can make his money. And one has to realize that what are those 4, 5 buckets, and how can I make money without upsetting these? And obviously, if you put too many ads, no one will come to your podcast, right? If you charge too much, no one is going to come, right? So you need to find that the right balance, and I think everyone will start finding that over a period of time.
And what you just said about, how in the future, we might be responding to advertising all the time without even realizing it. And, anything that sounds futuristic but plausible is something that will inevitably happen at some point, right? It will inevitably happen at some point. So does that worry you? Does it worry you that there'll be so much sort of, I won't even call it surveillance, because it's not really humans doing the surveillance, it's more algorithms who know every sort of rug of the individual, as it were. Does that worry you, or do you think that fine, it's all in our service anyway, so why does it matter?
It is a little worrying, but I think consumers will wake up to it, because you suddenly go and search for something, and then you go to Facebook, you suddenly see an ad for that, and you realize that, yeah, there is some cookie which is doing this. And today, especially those people who've seen, Social Dilemma, are even more sensitive to this. But consumers will wake up to it, and I think companies are also now. I was talking to a friend of mine who's in the algorithm space, and he was saying that, like Apple, which is saying that all the cookies are going to be in the phone. So it'll be in the phone. So it'll be totally privacy protected. Apparently, Android is going to do the same thing. So maybe those things will happen as a result. This kind of blatant and first time I was hit by this, Amit, you won't believe it, was about almost 15 years ago when I was taking a flight and I land in Kochi, and I switch on my those days BPL mobile phone, and I get an SMS message saying that, this Kochi hotel has got a great offer. So I said, shit, I mean, I didn't know that existed, right? I mean, you land in Kochi, and then obviously the mobile operator knows where I am, and they say, okay, you want a hotel? Here is a hotel, right? That's today so natural, right? You go and search for something, you get served something, it's so natural. And I think consumers will slowly realize I think it'll evolve in its own way. In the early days, consumer may have got very biased. Arey, I was looking for a Zodiac white shirt, and look at it on Facebook. Pe bhi aa gaya, abhi order karna hi padega. It's like Bhagwan ka den hai. But tomorrow consumer say, yeah, okay, yeah. So this is an algorithm. So it's there. Okay, fine. I may not buy it still if I'm not happy. Right. So that could happen. Consumer will also evolve. Right. Consumer will evolve, and consumers are pretty smart. Whatever the algorithms may say, consumers will figure out what they do, what they like, what they don't like, and I think that's going to happen. That consumers will wake up to all these hidden persuader tricks.
Yeah, and in fact, I think one danger also is of sort of treating consumers condescendingly as if they are sheep who don't have agency and can't see all this for themselves. And I also want to assure my listeners that there is no product placement on this episode. So although you have heard the names of a lot of brands, and Ambi just mentioned Zodiac, there is no product placement at all. Bhala Zodiac ki safedi mere kameez se safed kaise? We will have none of that happening here. So, it's time to get to your latest book, Spring. But before that, I'd actually like you to sort of say a few words about Sponge, because I enjoyed that as well. And I must confess that I hadn't read that earlier. While prepping for this episode, I thought I should read a bunch of your books. And I enjoyed Sponge also, especially as a framework for how one should think about just the process of learning, although you've sort of positioned it more towards leadership and so on. But so tell me a little bit about how the idea for the book came about, and if you can just sort of, I mean, I will of course urge all my listeners to kindly buy this, and especially Nawabs, Nudes and Noodles as well, because there is so much about advertising in that which we haven't spoken about, such as changing gender roles, how children are used, the use of celebs in advertising, and so much else that I wanted to ask, but that would take another 5 hours. But tell me a little bit about Sponge, how it came about, and it feels that all of these books, Sponge, Spring, now even though they are sort of, in a sense, self-help books where you're sort of sharing insights and lessons and so on, at another level, they're also deeply personal, which comes out in the narrative that these are life lessons that you have learned, and therefore, you're kind of sharing that with the world. So tell me a bit about Sponge.
Okay, Sponge, actually the idea for Sponge came long time back. I was walking in our IM Cal campus with an old friend of mine, and he's a big professor in the US, and he consults with a lot of big companies. And he was sharing his anguish, and he said, look, yeah, Ambi, I deal with all these CEOs in the US, and a lot of them, only thing they know is how to manage the board. I said, what do you mean? He said, no, yeah, they don't understand strategy, they don't understand anything, and it's just on how to go past every quarter and how to manage the board. Is that your experience? And that's when I started thinking back, and I told them, look, actually my experience is just the opposite. I've been lucky, but I've met so many CEOs in Indian business, and they've all been delightful. You learn so much from them. Yes, they are challenging. Some of them are a little rude. Some of them push you too hard. But very, very, you learn so much from. I've learned. I mean, I said I'm thankful that from my early stage in career, and I've had lucky to work with so many CEOs, and I've learned a lot. And we kept talking about that. Stayed in the back of my mind. And so when Nawab New Noodle came out, and I was sitting with Anish Chandy, who's my agent, and we were happy with how the book was doing. So he said, what next? So, and I said, look, yeah, I want to write about what you can learn from clients. So he said, can you tell me a story? And I narrated there's there in the book, right, when how Mr. Tata decided to drop everything and come to the NCPA to check the color of the car. I mean, that's an amazing attention to detail, but also the passion of the man. The fact that he's so passionate about the business, and he looks at these micro details, and he dropped everything and came there to spend an hour to check the color of the car. And he said, yeah, great. He said, write 2-3 chapters, and I wrote those. I think 20, 24, 27 chapters I wrote, and then I ran out, and he asked, I said, that's it, and I said, I will also write something which is completely unexpected. I've written about account executives from whom I've learned, and even written about a driver, an office driver in Hyderabad office, goes by, and I wrote one chapter on him because I think I learned something from him. So the hypothesis is, whether you're senior, junior, you will meet a lot, in B2B, Amit, in B2B marketing, there's always a buyer-seller fight. The customer is always seen as someone demanding a low price, making unreasonable demands of you, putting pressure on you. I said, no, I want to change the narrative. I said, look, you can learn from every one of your customers if you approach the situation with that mindset. And that was the reason for writing that book, and I've kind of dedicated it to all the wonderful clients I've had in my life. And I remember at the book talk which I gave, Sam Balsara of Madison asked me a cheeky question saying, Ambi, does it mean you only had good clients? So I said, no, I was a good agency, so I only got good clients. I don't know what kind of an agency you're running. I don't know what kind of clients you're getting. So he laughed. He said, yeah, good one. So, but the fact is, obviously, I've had tough times with clients, and in fact, 1 or 2 of those stories are also in the book, saying, really tough clients. I mean, clients who insult you, but then you can manage it. You can manage that situation, is all I'm saying. And some of these stories I've told my young colleagues, that this young pup of a brand manager said, I will sack your agency. And I was, maverick or whatever, and I had to tell him, listen, Amit, you can't sack the agency. Your father can't sack the agency. Your grandfather can't sack the agency. And I don't think you know your great-grandfather. So don't talk shit. I was a 1-year-old guy in the advertising, right? And this was a brand manager in a large company. I mean, that was really crazy to say that. But I said that. I don't know why he backed off. He said, no, yaar, why are you getting upset? I was just saying I need the poster in 2 days. and you're saying all this to me. I will not say, where am I? I'm not going to. He virtually started crying. Okay, and I tell these guys, look, guys, barking dogs never bite. So don't get scared if a customer tells you, I will sack you. But be worried if the customer doesn't tell you that he'll sack you, but watch out the smoke signals. And those are the clients who will actually sack you. So it was fun putting it together. Yeah.
That was such a filmy dialogue by you. I think all the listeners will suddenly be sitting up in their chair that your father can't sack me, your grandfather can't sack me. Marvelous. They're looking at Ambi Parameswaran with renewed respect. So, one more question about the book before we move on. So, I enjoyed all your personal anecdotes about Ratan Tata, about Rohinton Naga, about Hemu Ramaiah, some fantastic stories. But I was particularly struck by your anecdote about Verghese Kurian. And I'll quickly recap it for the benefit of my listeners, that Ambi and his team went to present something to Verghese Kurian, and they're presenting this campaign. And somebody in Verghese Kurian's team says, wait a minute, that blue is a bit of an issue. Can we do something about that blue? At which point, Mr. Kurian turns to this young pup in his organization and says, Dekho beta, not in so many words, obviously, but essentially that, listen, imagine a building with 5 pillars. And if you tell the architect, I want it to stand only on 2 pillars, and the architect does that and it falls, are you going to blame the architect? So similarly, don't mess around here. If you have any feedback, give it to them, but don't give arbitrary orders ki isko nikalo. And I thought that, what struck me about that was the humility of the man, that despite having reached where he has reached and achieved all that he has achieved, you're willing to sit back and acknowledge that my knowledge is limited, and I should keep that in mind when I sort of engage with the world. And it strikes me that that is, in fact, identical to the metaphor of the sponge that you're bringing out, that the sponge has a sort of functional humility built into it, that it will just absorb all the water, take the nutrients, and then let the water seep out of it. So my larger question, based on the fact that you have, of course, met many more CEOs and important people than I have, how important a characteristic is humility in people achieving excellence and, reaching where they reach?
I think, in several stories I've written, I've recounted, that some of the wonderful people I've met are the most humble people, right? I mean, the leaders, whether it was Rohinton Naga, who I used to call him as an account executive. I used to call him and he used to take the call, and I say, sir, we have money shortage, we need money. And he used to talk to me. So we got this thing, it's going to Russia. Once I get the, so whether it was, so I think humility is extremely, extremely important in a CEO, in any leader. Forget about CEO. Any leader have to be humble, have to be ready to listen to people around him, whether it is a young colleague or it is a peer. So decide, I think that's a story which I've narrated about Dr. Kurian, that, once they identify a partner to work with, then the partner is always right? Till they probably mess up in a big way, but you select carefully. You don't select someone who will mess up in a big way, right? So you select carefully. After that, you trust the partner, right? So in advertising, you work with a photographer, you trust the photographer judgment. You work with a filmmaker and you say, I don't want a music. And I remember we made some film and the brief was, we don't want a jingle. But the director comes and says, no, I've done a jingle. Right? And for a fact, a jingle costs him money. Putting some simple music is costing much less than, say, recording voice, etc. But so you admire the guy, saying, you got, you're committed to this, fine, we will watch it. And then if you don't like it, it will be rejected. So you got to surround yourself with associates, with partners whom you can trust. And that will only come if you are humble and you're not full of yourself saying, I'm the greatest guy, I have the biggest ideas, I'm the smartest guy. No, that's not the way for ongoing success.
And that brings us to your latest book. And you actually mentioned the sort of the genesis story of the idea for the book, that you were giving a talk about sponge at, this university campus. And at the end of it, this young girl in the last, near the last row asked you a question that, all this is okay for you to say. You have access to all these CEOs, you can learn for them. But, for most of us, we just face rejection and everything we do. How do we sort of cope with rejection? At which point you pointed out that they expected you to sheepishly not have much to say because you have been so privileged. But instead, you gave a 10-minute talk where you spoke about all the rejections in your life and how they shaped you, and got a standing ovation at the end of it. And thus was born Spring, bouncing back from a rejection, which is on the stands now. And I encourage everyone to kind of pick it up. So tell me a bit about this. Like, is it in hindsight that you look back at the times that you face rejection, for example, from Unilever twice when you were in IIT Madras and then IIM Calcutta, and then you sort of draw from that? Or is rejection something you actually thought about at all the different times you actually got rejected and, built a framework around that to sort of deal with that? Or is it, the accumulated wisdom of a lived lifetime sort of looked at in hindsight?
It's a combination. I think I thank that girl for asking that question. And even now, I sent this book to my old boss, and he also asked, "What rejection have you faced, yaar?" So I said, "I've written a book, please read it." So I think some of this is hindsight. You realize that at that time you did face that rejection, and you managed to handle it, and you handle it in a particular way. Some of which is kind of, reflection of what happened in the past. And some of it could be live. The Hindustan Lever summer internship was live. It was a rejection which hurt me. I didn't sleep that night. But then I said, look, I cannot continue like this. I cannot continue applying to Hindustan Lever and getting rejected. This is not on. This is not my life. I need to figure out what I enjoy doing. And it gave me that whole power of, redirection, and I explored a new area. And, the 2 months in Calcutta, I enjoyed different types of cuisine. I went to my first jazz concert. I started understanding what was jazz. So it was so enriching than, going around, let's say, some Jabalpur market and, doing some market research study for a packaged goods company. It was so much more enriching. So some of those are live. You know that. You've been rejected. You can handle it in one way, but you handle it. Like given the example of the rejection which we had with Hyundai, right? When we faced, we pitched and we knew we were not getting it. And at that time we said, look, we are not getting this. What are we doing wrong? And then we figured out you cannot win a big car client by carrying 3 layouts and 2 scripts. It's not going to work, right? You need to rethink the whole thing. And you need to immerse yourself in the category. And this is what we did. And then we got the Tata Motors business. So some of those are live. Some of those are like you think back. Like I would narrated a story about my grandfather. At that time I was a kid, right? I was probably 8 years or something like that. I didn't realize the momentousness of that event. That, Prime Minister's car was supposed to stop in front of my grandfather's business premise. And my grandfather was supposed to shake his hand and garland him. And okay, it's such a huge honor, right? And the car just drives by. Did my grandfather get upset? No. He didn't take it personally. He said, no, it's okay. They didn't stop. Fine, no problem. I didn't ask for it. It came my way. It's not going to happen. It's okay. As it turned out, on the return trip, the car came and stopped, and my grandfather actually met Prime Minister and garlanded him and all that. But that for 1 hour, I did not see him say one bad word about anyone. I was a little kid hanging around there on the side, just watching what was going on. People were, ranting and raving and all that, but my grandfather was cool. Okay, no problem. I said, wow.
Even someone who had reason to say it's Nehru's fault didn't say it.
Yeah, Nehru or Kamaraj's fault, or probably that cop rider's fault who didn't stop. But he didn't blame anyone. He didn't say anything. Yeah, he could have actually ranted and raved about Nehru, and he would have been way ahead of his time. But he didn't do that. And that, if I had not started writing this book and started digging deeper into rejection, and like we discussed, Amit, you don't start writing a book. You form some kind of an idea and you start reading. And I started reading books on resilience, about 6-7 books on resilience. I read, started reading articles. I went, Psychology Today is a fabulous website. I read all those articles. I went through some academic journals. And then I came across this term, don't take it personally. And then the story came alive in my mind. When I read that, what do you mean by don't take it personally? And then I linked that my grandfather's story to the concept of don't take it personally. So, you read, and then you pick up something and then you connect it. Even that, APJ Abdul Kalam story about the inner critic and all that I read that story in a different book. And I said, look, what must he have gone through when the so-called first SLV literally came down in 317 seconds? And what did Professor Satish Dhawan do to protect Dr. Kalam? And how Dr. Kalam remembers that, so vividly, and that, how he overcame that failure or that rejection to then become a, very, very successful, satellite launching technologist, among other things. So when you have one or two stories in mind, you start reading, and then you suddenly start connecting, saying, I want to write about this, I want to write about that. Where's the story? And you go back. And what I also decided, this book, I will, Sponge is all about my stories, especially FCB Ulka, a lot of those stories. I said Spring will have minimum FCB Ulka stories and maximum other stories. So I spoke with academicians, I spoke with very senior bureaucrats, I spoke with sports personnel, Olympians, and then I started pulling out their stories into the book. Startup entrepreneurs, I started putting that in the story. So this book is a little bit, it's not just my advertising stories, it's a lot more from, there are startup entrepreneurs in this, there are academicians in this, there are Olympians, there are authors, musicians. There are probably 60 different stories in this book, and probably 6 of them are from my life and the others are from outside, So some of the stories are so sensitive that I've hidden the name. But, some reviewer called me. He said, are these all true stories? I said, yes, every single story there is true. If I have not put the person's name, it happened. I didn't put the name, not to embarrass him or her, right? So every single story there is true. So it was great fun writing it, and this book is actually aimed at the slightly younger target audience. So when someone writes to me saying enjoyed the book, etc., I say, yeah, give it to your son, or give it to your daughter, or give it to your neighbor's kid, or give it to your nephew or niece. Especially if they're 19, 20, 25, they will find it a very useful read. So thank you. I think this is a different book to write. Interesting.
No, I loved it and found it so insightful, not just for the 20-year-old, but also for someone in his mid-40s like me. I guess compared to you, I am the slightly younger audience.
You're spring chicken.
I'm a spring chicken. I was, one of your insights which struck me reminded me of something that happened in my poker days, where a bunch of us veterans were sitting around and this young guy comes and he says, I'm playing so well, nobody ever calls my bluffs. At which point we all laughed and I told him that, listen, if no one ever calls your bluffs, it means you're not bluffing enough. Because obviously the optimal level of bluffing will mean that some of your bluffs get called. And I was reminded of this by this lovely quote in your book, which is, and I want all the 20-year-olds kindly to listen to this and remember this. Quote, if you have not faced rejection, maybe you have not tried hard enough. Stop quote. And elsewhere you quote Azim Premji as saying, quote, if people are not laughing at your dreams are too small. Stop quote. And all of it was very inspiring. I mean, it actually sort of gave me a warm glow when I look back at the various times I have been rejected, because I can use these narratives to sort of frame it. So, I've taken a lot of your time today, and I know you're also looking forward to, getting to lunch. So I would ask all my listeners not to reject your wonderful book and to immediately go out and buy Spring, Bouncing Back from Rejection. But before that, a sort of a final question from you, that one of the things that I realized while going through your books, while watching your videos and so on, is that over this life that you have lived, you have actually made a conscious effort to write about all of this wisdom that you have accumulated. And at the end, thankfully the world gets to benefit from it, because we get these books and we get those videos and all of that, and there are a lot of gems in there. But if you were to today encounter the 20-year-old Ambi Parameswaran, maybe the sort of the kid from Godavari Hostel, IIT Madras, will just listen to Dark Side of the Moon and who's on a bit of a high and feeling good about life. And if you encounter him and you have to give him some life advice, what would you tell him that you wish someone had told you back then?
Oh, thank you, Amit. Thank you for having me on the show and all your kind words about my book. I'm happy, we're doing this show. I'm happy that we are reaching an audience talking about the. So, let's say a 20-year-old Ambi will be probably sitting in the Godavari common room after dinner with his good friend, God bless him, Joe Mari Swami, listening to Dark Side of the Moon for the 300th time, right? I'll probably go and tell him, yeah, start reading more, you know, uh, enough of this Dark Side of the Moon. But I really don't, I think IIT was good because it kind of widened the horizon. I would have probably told him, it's good. I should have told him this. Said, get your swimming right. You won't believe it, Amit. They built this beautiful Olympic-sized swimming pool in IIT Madras. I went for a swim with my good friend Bala, PD Bala, we call him, and Joe. And I don't know what happened. I almost sank, right? And I kind of went down, and the lifeguard pulled me out. After that, I did not get into the pool, right? And this has been nagging in my head, swimming, I've not learned swimming. I'm always scared of depths, So a year and a half ago, I said, I've got to overcome that. And I got myself a personal trainer, and now I can do, 10 laps or 20 laps on an Olympic-sized swimming pool without a problem. So I would have told him that, guy, get up, tomorrow morning, go learn swimming. I would have told him that. But, finally, I did learn swimming, so that was good. That is very good.
That's a pretty amazing answer, because you have done so many different things in your life, but the one thing that you focused on now is the one thing that you did not do. And I think there's a lesson in this for all our young listeners that don't leave things undone. Just try everything. Just go for it. And if you aren't rejected, you're not trying hard enough. Ambi, thank you once again for coming on this show. It's been such a pleasure chatting.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Amit, for having me on your fantastic show. And Seen and the Unseen. And I hope during the discussion, we have done a bit of seen and unseen on this show. We've taken our listeners to some of the stuff they have seen, and probably many other stuff which is unseen for them. So thank you very much, and God bless you. Thank you.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, do head on over to your nearest bookstore, online or offline, and pick up any of Ambi's books, which I will also link from the show notes. You can follow him on Twitter at AmbiMGP. You can follow me at Amit Varma, AmitBarma. You can browse past episodes of The Seen and the Unseen at seenunseen.in. Thank you for listening. Did you enjoy this episode of The Seen and the Unseen? If so, would you like to support the production of the show? You can go over to seenunseen.in/support and contribute any amount you like to keep this podcast alive and kicking. Thank you.